Dr. Duretti in the process of parking, so he'll be here. I think just because this is our first time in person, just for the board members, I'll start. I'm Jim DeBoger, and you see me on the Zoom calls, board chair. I live in Tallahassee. Maybe just get the rest of you to introduce yourself and talk about where you're from, your background, that kind of thing. I'm the person appointed as a representative of an advocacy organization. As Dr. DeCesar.
So I'm Julie DeCesar. I'm a practicing obstetrician. I've been practicing obstetrics in the state for 25 years now. I've done academic medicine, OB hospitalist work, private practice. In my current role, I'm at HCA Healthcare, and I 50% private practice. I delivered a set of twins yesterday. So still in the trenches. Was worried I was not going to get home in time to sleep before this meeting, but feel very passionate about this program and making sure that our families get the care that they need and deserve.
Renee.
I'm Renee Oliver. I am the parent on the board. My son Ian is 19. He was accepted into NICA in 2008. And here I am. Oh, I don't know. That's it. Just three of us.
Dr. London's on the phone.
Oh.
Now they. Oh, he's muted. So let's get him off mute.
He's iPad 3, I think.
Yeah, and Dr. Duretti is our other board member. He's going to be here in person. He's in the parking lot, probably. Hope he has better luck than I did.
On a map.
You can join me by phone.
No, I see his picture. I can see him.
It's iPad 3. He's up at on the top left of our screen.
But he's muted.
Yeah.
He's trying to speak.
Yep.
The gift the pandemic gave us. One of the many.
All righty. Mr. Chair, how about now?
We got you now.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right, I apologize. I'm at the tip of Long Island and I had technical problems and I'm on a borrowed iPad. So I'm Robert London. I'm an anesthesiologist. I've been in Central Florida for 30 years with a clinical interest in risk management and obstetrical anesthesia. Good morning, everybody.
Morning. And Dr. Duretti will be here soon. And when he comes, we can stop and let him introduce himself. Before we go any further, Mr. Senior will recognize you for a housekeeping item.
Yes, I would like to. I'm Steve Senior, just so everybody knows, I'm general counsel for NICA, and I'm also in Tallahassee. And we would request that we have a executive session. I would like to request an executive session for the next meeting. And I believe we have an executive session scheduled for this meeting as well. All
right, we'll show that request approved without objection.
And I think we need to announce the attendees of the executive session will be to discuss pending litigation. In attendance at that meeting will be the board members, myself, our counsel, Marty Goldberg and Daryl Saylor, and Tim Doctor, no, just Melissa Jocks.
Okay. And like our counsel said, the sole purpose is to discuss pending litigation. There's no other board business. Discussed these, and there, I guess we'll have a
court reporter. Yes, we'll have a court reporter
transcribing, so there will be a record that nothing else is discussed. All right, so just we will have the executive session at 4:30, if not sooner. I mean, if we luck out and we get through the agenda before then, I'm not going to keep us here till 4:30 just to have the executive session, so. All right, next next agenda item is the minutes. I think all the board members got copies of the minutes. Are there any corrections or additions to the minutes? Okay.
No.
All right, we'll get a motion to approve the minutes.
Motion to approve.
Dr. DeCesar.
Seconded.
Dr. London seconds. Any objection? No, without objection, we'll show the minutes. Approved. And Melissa, let's go ahead. I want Dr. DeRetti here for most everything after this, but I think on this issue with the bank account, that's pretty dry stuff. I think we can go ahead and do it with the four of us. So I'm gonna recognize you just to discuss the need for adding an additional signer to the bank account.
Thanks. Current signers, as you know, are you, Steve, and myself. We process checks every day, all day long. In a typical business, that's probably what the best practice there is, but we want to be responsive, families' needs as best we can. So we're going to keep doing that. The problem is, if I want to take time off, that means these two have to be available all day long, every day. So what I would like to do, and some checks require two signers, and so if I'm gone, then these two absolutely have to be available. So I would like to add another signer to the bank account, Kathy Alexander, who is not involved fiscally in our operation at all, so that we have some redundancy in case I get hit by a bus.
And just so you understand, we checked with the auditors as to the
Yes,
appropriateness of that. We don't want to create a situation where we get an audit finding for lack of control. And we verified that this would be an acceptable.
and it does require, and the way that it's controlled as well is, and Matt can confirm this. She doesn't always have access to sign. She would have access to sign during defined periods, and that would have to be delegated in the system for a time period certain when I was out. So that's how we manage that.
Can I ask
All right.
a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Are they paper checks or electronic?
It's mostly ACHs. It's by me approving the ACH batch. That's my signature.
Yeah.
And then some paper checks.
Any other discussion, any questions?
During the time that we're gonna have it available for her, is it that you tell Matt to open it up? for her?
Yes, yes,
And if you're unavailable, it would have to be Jim or Steve.
right.
And I could tell you that my availability sometimes is not. So they probably do. I mean, I try to, I do as good as I can. I do, things have been held up just because of the logistics of me getting to a computer and that kind of thing. So any further questions or discussions? Want to care to make a motion?
Yeah, I motion to add Kathy Alexander as a signer on the bank account.
Okay, thank you. Second?
Second.
All right, Dr. Caesar, second. All right. Any
I'll move.
objection? All right, thank you, doctor. Any objection? All right, let's show that one. Let's show that passed without objection. All right, now is when I would probably, it would be a good time to buy some time and get Dr. DeRetti here, but let me go ahead and just open the discussion. I know everyone here is very happy with the work that Melissa has done. Absolute best person. I mean, she was in the right place at the right time. We could not have made a better pick. And I've been procrastinating, but when we hired her, it was under contract. And it was as an interim position. Melissa runs a business. We may yet entice her to throw our hat in the ring, but we have to, as a board, we have to think about getting permanent leadership put in place, regardless of who that is. Obviously, if Melissa were to apply, she would be a strong candidate. But I do think we owe it to all the families to do a good thorough search. With that in mind, and just having done this, like I filled in as the interim CEO of the NICA Florida. I think that was I was in that role when we all got appointed to the board, and I will tell you doing a search for a position like this is a lot more involved than you might think. You don't just run an ad on Indeed or whatever it is now. It used to be the wrong ad in my time. You don't just run an ad in the paper and get a handful of candidates and then go through. That literally, I was hired to be the interim CEO for 6 months. It turned into a year because just, this whole process of identifying good candidates and properly vetting them and giving them time, because we are obviously looking for people who are successful, and successful people won't just walk off the job. You have to give them their transition time as well. But so that's why I want to think ahead. I know we have a commitment from Melissa to see us through the next session. So that would be through the end of April, or beginning of May. So this is giving us not quite a year. I don't know that this will be quite as, this has to be as lengthy a process. Only insert. Welcome, Dr. Duretti. Let me, I'm gonna just stop real quick and Dr. Duretti, we just, because this is the first time we've all been together, just ask the board members to just briefly introduce themselves, talk about where they're from, their role, their perspective.
Hey, Narendra Dwivedi. I'm a neonatologist by profession. So we take care of newborns, and I'm the medical director for the NICU, level 4 NICU at Advent for Children. We take care of about 25,000 deliveries of systems, so all the babies that need higher level of care come to the NICU here. And I was told about the opportunity for this board, and we take care of a lot of babies with HIE, and we know what parents go through, and just want to see how we can help get the perspective and do our best to help you through the process.
Dr. Duretti, just to catch up on where we went ahead and approved the minutes, and we approved a motion to add an additional signer to the bank account. Sure. And you just housekeeping type things. I'm really glad you're here for this discussion with you. It's a search for a permanent CEO. It just real quick, Melissa has committed to stay with us through the next legislative session, which means that in an ideal world, we'll have a candidate identified, ready to go by either the 4th of May, or I guess we could probably get you to stay through the end of May if need be, but it gives us less than a year. And I was just telling the rest of them, having done searches for these kinds of positions, that you really need to give yourself as much time as possible. So with that said, I want to get your thoughts, but I want to just lay out what I kind of have in mind. First off, number one, we could, and I'm going to relate a lot of this back to when I was with the ARC Florida. We got a new CEO after a couple of, frankly, not good choices, and it's because of the process that the board had used. We hired a search firm that did a national search. search firm, like she does either $40,000 or $50,000. We can do that. They can do a national search. They're great at looking at LinkedIn and identifying, we can give them what your desired qualifications and background is, and they'll get you a very extensive list of people. Then you go and vet them and come up with finalists, and then the board makes a final choice. That wound up, like I said, it wound up costing somewhere in the neighborhood of $40,000 to $50,000. And the person we wound up getting was a person that I'd known for 20 years that was literally right there in Tallahassee. And had I known he was interested, I could have saved that organization a lot of money and said, you've got a good man. So that's kind of the, but that is I think that's just something I want to get any thoughts on, is whether we feel we need that. Now, having said that, I've had people reach out to me who would be highly qualified individuals that would make a very good starting pool of candidates. They're from different types of background. There's a finance person, kind of like me and Melissa, who has a child with a disability, so he would have a certain heart for the job. The head of the neurology department, this is a nurse at one of the big major hospitals in, I believe in Tampa, has expressed interest. Former colleague of mine on the House staff who actually drafted the NICA legislation and is an attorney, has reached out, expressed. So, I mean, these are high caliber people, whether they're the different people. So I would be inclined to say we might want to just see what we get without going through the expense and frankly, just the time to engage one of these firms. And with that, what I'd like to do is to form a committee. And here's the rub, is that the committee cannot, I don't believe the committee can be composed of more than one board member. Because if it's more than one board member, every interview we do would have to be publicly noticed.
Yeah.
And we would, it's just, I don't think that's feasible. It might be, we may want to think about that once we get down to, say, 2 or 3 finalists and ask them to do an interview with the board so that you all have a chance to meet the person before you make the final. But I think in terms of, because some of these people don't necessarily want their current bosses to know that they're testing the waters. I mean, we have the same thing in Florida, with university searches, that's been a big issue, where you want to attract top caliber people, but top caliber people generally are in top caliber jobs and don't want to lose them if it doesn't work out. So what I'd like to do, and I spoke, I'd like to establish a committee. I will chair that committee. I think this is a pretty important job. I would like to get, we have a parent advisory committee that I'd like to ask Renee, Ms. Oliver, I'd like to ask your help in identifying someone good from that committee. We definitely would want an OBGYN, so I might look to one of you or to both of you for any suggestions. I think because of the fact that we kind of are under the CFO's office, I'd like to get the CFO, perhaps someone from the Office of Insurance Regulation. And then just because we're a nonprofit, I would like to also hit up a couple of, or not a couple, but hit up someone from that world, amongst the people that I know, in that world, just to help us. So that would be a committee of 6 or 7 people, and again, we would, what I would envision this committee doing would be to do the initial vetting of the applications, maybe create kind of a list of semi-finalists, interview those people, then come up with a few options as finalists, and then hopefully have the entire board do an interview with those candidates, probably in like a special board meeting. And then make a decision. So that's what I'm going to lay out to you all as a starting point, but there's no pride in that. So I'm open to any other suggestions.
I like that idea. I think that's great. I wish, Melissa knows how I feel. She's been amazing. If we could duplicate her, that would be great. But I know somebody along the same line. She's been so open, and so finding people like that would be awesome.
Well, I think Melissa's kind of established the prototype for how you do this. And we may be spoiled, but I think that's what we're going to expect is an approach like what Melissa's thinking.
Mr. Chairman, if I may.
Yes, ma'am.
I agree completely about trying to do this through contacts versus engaging a search firm. I think in all of my recruitment efforts, my best recruits came from people that I knew through societies or connections or colleagues versus the recruitment firms, which can be very expensive and laborious. So I think if you have good candidates, then it just makes sense to move forward
Okay.
this way.
Sure. Thank you. Yeah, and I mean, it could be that we might revisit that if we don't get what we feel is an adequate pool of candidates, but I'd just like to see what we can do without it.
If I may, I may have missed, can Melissa stay on? I mean, she's not interested.
Melissa can stay on if Melissa wants to. And then again, like I said, if she were to put her hat in the ring, she would be a strong candidate. Fine, she'd be able to. But right now, I think, again, if you want.
No, it will be. So I've committed to stay through the end of next session. I don't know whether I want to do it permanently or not, but honestly, regardless of that, I think the board should look around and see who else might be interested. So it's not, I really, there's no secret behind it. I'm sort of at the tail end of my career. And this has been rewarding but hard. So I want to think long and hard, because if I do make a commitment, this will probably be where I end up for the rest of my career. So I take that very seriously.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So on the new position for if we're looking for somebody, do we have a time limit? Are we going to limit that amount of time? Like they can only do it for this many years, or it's if they get hired, as long as they stay, they stay?
I think if this would be for a permanent CEO.
Okay.
And as long as they perform.
Mhm.
To the satisfaction of the board, then I would say they stay home. Yeah, and I think it's going to challenge the board not to be complacent, to honestly and fearlessly evaluate the CEO. And I think be very candid with the CEO what the expectations are, what the standard is that we want to have, and all that. And that'll be part of what we're going to need to consider is the person, because temperament, how a person reacts to other people is just about as important as the hard skills. I think, and that's become very obvious. So, Dr. London, did you have any comments?
I think it's a great idea to leverage the experience of the chair and the people that you have referenced who have deep ties to the community of potential applicants. I think that allows the momentum to continue and gives us an immediate focus, considering the time constraints of wanting to try to identify and have a commitment by certainly May or June of next year. So I fully support, and I'm comfortable making a motion that we accept the chairman's recommendation as proposed.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? All right, we have a second. Is there a discussion? All right, so I think we settled on the way forward, and thank you all for that. So without objection, the motion passes. And that's it's tough getting old. You see a thing without these glasses. All right, Melissa, now we're going to get into another topic of great interest. And Melissa, I'm going to recognize you if you'll lead our discussion on the criminal pay profile.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You had asked before we open this up for discussion to just sort of get everybody to an even field as to their understanding about what we're currently reimbursing families. We reimburse for CNA care $15 an hour, for LPN $25.40, and for RN $29.10. We spend about $25.2 million a year on caregiver hours, either to families or to other caregivers. I think I mentioned at the last board meeting that even in the short time I've been here, I feel like more and more families make a decision to stay home and take care of their loved ones on their own. A lot of it is because of the nursing shortage, I think. So I always look back to double check what I've told you all in the past to make sure I've been consistent. Like I said, our annual reimbursement is $25.2 million. Prior to the change that you all approved effective April 1st, it was 23 million. I think I told you as a result of that change, it would increase 2 million. It increased 2.2, so I was a little bit off there. 20.3 of that is paid directly to families. 2.2 is paid to others directly to staffing agencies or to other caregivers who are basically 1099 to the parents. And then 2.7 is paid by others. There are some third-party insurance that cover nursing. We do have families currently having their nursing covered by Medicaid that will change in the future. We'll talk about that a little bit later. And if you look at our 225 families, over half are authorized for 24-hour care. And when I say authorized, we have a form that a physician completes that indicates the number of hours required and the level. So CNA, LPN, RN, that is an attestation of the care needed, as well as an attestation that the parent is capable of providing that required care. 37 families are authorized for 20 to 22 hours, 14, 16, 19, 8 families, 12 to 15, and then 17 families are at 10 or fewer hours. We've got 29 families that have no hours. And Renee keeps asking me, ooh. We have a couple of participants in facilities. We have a couple who just don't want anything to do with NICA. But we have a fair number who just have never requested custodial care. Now, interestingly, as part of the process I'm going through with the retroactive payments, I'm emailing every family, and the ones who have never had nursing care, I'm saying to them, I show that you've never requested anything. Is that correct? And I've had 2 reach back out and say, well, hold please. I think I might be interested. So that 29 number might change a bit. And then the range of reimbursement to these families. And just as a reminder, we do have an IRS ruling that, gosh, 10 years? Yeah, it's that this is not taxable income. I think a long time ago, NICA used to 1099 families on this income, but that's no longer required. 117 families, or a little over half, receive between $100,000 and $255,000 a year. 6 of our families receive more than 200,000 because the majority of the hours authorized are for nursing care, and 1 parent is a nurse. 4 receive between 150 and 185,000 because some hours are for nursing care. We might have 12 hours CNA, 12 hours LPN. So where a parent is a nurse and where a certain number of hours are authorized for nursing, we pay those authorized number of hours at that nursing rate. And then the remainder are between 104 and just under 150 because there's 20 to 24 hours authorized and the parent provides all or almost all of the care at $15 an hour. So that's more than half the families. Then another 11% receive between 75,000 and 99,000, just because they're authorized for fewer hours or because they choose to have other caregivers in the home. Then close to 20% of our families receive between 50 and 74,000. So the majority of those are because they have other caregivers in the home and they choose not to provide all of the care. And then a small percentage are between 25 and 49. And again, usually those families have other caregivers in the home. And as I mentioned, we've got some that have no reimbursement. Most of them don't receive anything at all, but we just have a couple where 100% is nursing care that we pay to either the nursing provider or a private duty nurse. So you had asked that I just set the stage with that information, and then I've got the names of people who have asked to speak. Several families have asked to speak on a couple different topics, but I think every single one who requested to speak wanted to speak at least on this topic as well. So if you want me to go ahead and start calling names,
I
or
think we can repeat. I'll run the last piece if you give me all this.
you think you can read that?
Well,
But I thought we could start with the people in person first. And I think one family who said they were going to be in person or not, so. But this is complete. If you can't read it, tell me. I'll take
Well,
this.
I have one that I'm reading from them.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. I
Just
forgot.
So I'll do it at the very end.
Okay, well, I just want to, real quick, I want to go over just a few key points. We're paying $15 an hour, it's CNA.
Yes.
You said 24, 25, 40 for LPN,
Mhm.
and then 29, 10 for mine.
Those are the Medicaid private duty nursing rates.
And this can be up to 24.
Yes.
So some families are getting $15 an hour for 168 hours a week. That's how you're getting up into 6 figures. With and so about half the families you say are today receiving in excess of 100,000. And about half under that. And the IRS ruling, that's non-taxable, so it's all. So. All right, so I think that's where this is. Also, just understand. I believe these are based on state Medicaid rates. Just as a side note, I think these rates will be readdressed at some point, just because there's in the current budget, there was proviso language that, well, there was major funding and then proviso language requiring that anybody working for the state or the state contractor gets paid at least $15 an hour. So to make some of these rates get adjusted, but the biggest thing is that nobody in Medicaid is getting paid $15 an hour for 168 hours a week. So and I think, and Melissa, thank you for just giving us an overview, just so you all have an understanding of kind of the context of this discussion. All right, so this is
The other Melissa.
All right,
Is it?
Melissa, you are recognized.
If you want to speak on the subject.
Okay.
Yeah, we're gonna do our public testimony now, because I think everybody wants to talk about this topic. And then if you have another topic, just slip it in now and that way.
Well,
you
my daughter's Mia,
can-
she's 15. She had traumatic brain injury at birth, due to probably what was doctor negligence. We were, she was in utero with meconium leaking for over 24 hours. She suffered a stroke. We knew pretty shortly after the emergency C-section, which my epidural had worn off, so that was very traumatic also. Knew pretty shortly after that we're gonna have some issues. So she has cerebral palsy, epilepsy, she was failure to thrive, feeding tube, she swims with feeding tube now. And she just had some complete spinal fusion in January for the severe scoliosis. So there's where we are on that. I work with her 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I'm on call with her. She has nighttime seizures. She requires food 4, 5, 6 times a day through a feeding tube. All her seizure meds go through the feeding tube. It's complete care. Cognitively, she's a little bit more, with it. So there's a lot of emotional issues that go there. We have a lot of depression. Just a lot of stuff, teenage daughter, full care stuff. So I guess, with inflation and we're working 24 hours a day and we're on call and, the CNA rate is $15 an hour, but it doesn't leave a lot of time for yourself. It doesn't leave a lot of time for, mental health or anything. So you really want the pay increase because of, increases on everything and you're you're the sole provider. And I think that really opened the door when they increased the pay for people that don't have CNA, don't have RN, don't have LPN, you raise that rate. So I think it goes naturally into raising the other rates with the CNA and things like that. So that's too much to say. That's my story. So, I thought about bringing her today, but she, she's going to be very happy here, but she's a great kid. I wouldn't trade a minute of her for the world. But yeah, it's a lot of work. And I know that all the rest of the parents here can testify to that. It's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, physical, mental, emotional work. There's no off time, there's no downtime. That's it. It's our lives. And we wouldn't, I don't think anyone here would trade 1 minute of it for anything. So that's that all.
Thank you. And thank you for being here. Good to see people in person. And I think next go to Ashley.
Okay, I just have a statement prepared, so let me paint a picture for you. You're 31 years old, you've completed a military career where you fought in a war, Desert Storm, serving your country, risking your life, and having completed a college degree. You sit down to interview for a job, and your employer offers you this. We're offering you a $130,000 salary, where you will work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, with no break. However, if you do take some time off, your pay will be docked for the hours you don't work. You also will receive this income tax-free. However, you will not be contributing to Social Security. Therefore, when you eventually retire, you solely will be relying on your ability to save because Social Security isn't an option for you. You should also think about purchasing life insurance because if something should happen to you, like a heart attack from this very emotional, high-stress job, your children and spouse will not be eligible for SSI because you aren't contributing to Social Security, as your income from this job is basically phantom income. You'll be required over the years to do a lot of heavy lifting. And again, we do not offer any workers' compensation plans. We don't offer disability whatsoever. You will not receive retirement benefits, nor retirement matching or savings options. You will not receive holidays off, no weekends off. You will rarely get any sleep, as this job requires you to be available at all times. No paid vacation. As a matter of fact, if you take a vacation, your work will go with you and you will work the entire time you are on vacation. You'll most likely pay double for your vacation because of all of the additional space you will need to complete all of your tasks at hand. I hope you don't have any additional children because you will not be able to attend sporting events, award ceremonies, any special memorable activities with those you additionally love. We do not offer medical, dental, or vision benefits. Actually, we don't offer any insurance or benefits at all. And just to be clear, this position has no opportunity for a rate increase. And therefore your rate will be $15 an hour as long as you are employed with us. Would any of you be interested in this position? Do you know anyone who would jump at this type of job? I would be willing to answer with a big fat no. Well, all of us, we've had no choice. And all of my husband's career plans were ripped away from him and our entire family because of a lot of medical professionals made a lot of really bad choices. So good afternoon. My name is Ashley Hammer. For those of you who don't know me, my husband is Sean Hammer. We are the parents to 20-year-old NICA participant Brennan. Today, I'm sharing my opinion about parent pay. My husband's been receiving parent pay since about 2005 because it took NICA 3 years to share the information about the parental pay benefit. So he went without for that long. Sean left a tenured management position making over $100,000 a year where he received benefit, profit sharing, 4 weeks paid vacation, and he only was required to work 55 hours a week. Not to mention, he received 2 days off a week, holiday pay, many promotions, and annual pay increases. Brennan was previously attending PPEC, where a nurse overdosed him his Robenal, and he coded, causing him to be rushed to the ER, and he almost died. Would you ever take your child back to a place like this? There was no alternative to child care for Brennan at this point, so the only option was for Sean to resign from his position and care for Brennan. Originally only being paid $10 an hour for 10 hours a day to a child who has always required 24-hour care. Brennan has zero head control. He's G-tube fed, and shortly after this, and he had received a trach shortly after he was born. After the class action settlement, Sean's rate was increased to $15 an hour for 20 hours a day in 2012. Since then, he hasn't received a raise. 10 years, no raise. That is actually unheard of in any industry. I would be willing to bet no one in here has ever done that. The Florida State average annual rate increase is 3%. That's just the average. Let me put that into a number for you. That means NICA would owe us about $200,000 in back pay, and Sean would be making somewhere around $20.16 an hour currently, which is still actually very pathetic hourly rate for someone who has worked in the same job for 20 years with the same company. I'd like to share a couple of little thoughts. When my husband was finally told about the parent pay, NICA told him, if you are receiving parent pay, you are not allowed to be employed anywhere else during any of the time, or you would be fined for perjury and you would lose your parent pay benefit forever. Therefore, having any additional income, having an option to work from home wasn't there. I also want to share with you when someone is out of the workforce for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus years, once something happens to our children, getting back into the workforce and finding a job will be extremely challenging, especially when you technically have zero work history. When an individual is paid an hourly employment rate, employment laws are violated if that employee works over 40 hours a week. NICA requires parents to work 168 hours a week. That's 4 times the legal allowance. NICA pays $15 an hour for parent pay for those who don't hold any additional nursing licenses. However, when nurses who hold those licenses come into our home to care for our children, we, the unlicensed individuals, are required to then train the licensed individuals for hours upon hours while we no longer get paid because NICA is paying for the untrained nurse to be in our home and we're training them how to care for our children. But NICA gladly pays them much more than they're willing to pay us. So when having a discussion about the pathetic pay rate with NICA families, board members over the years, I've received a couple of argument points. And my rebuttals are these. Argument number 1, well, NICA pays you 24/7 nursing. So you can have, NICA will pay for 24/7 nursing, so you can go out and get a career. Well, my rebuttal is this. Can NICA guarantee my employer will not fire me for having to call out constantly due to seizures, extreme excessive illness, ER visits, multiple surgeries, and then more seizures Because of the surgery, these children are constantly getting sick, not to mention nurses, they're people too. They get sick, they take vacations, they change their job. Therefore, there aren't always nurses available. They're not 100% reliable. As often as we have nurses call out or the agencies put them on other cases, leaving us with no nurses, sometimes days, weeks, months with no nursing. Can NICA guarantee I will not be overlooked for promotions due to the above reasons? Or how about be able to even keep my job? No job will allow endless and unexpected personal leave like a parent of a NICA participant needs. My argument number 2 is, I always hear this, well, NICA pays you $130,000 annual salary, which is a really good salary. Well, I don't think that's a very decent salary if I wasn't required to work 24/7. If you actually calculated my husband's salary, he left 16 years ago. By the 55 hours a week he worked, if you multiply that by 168 hours a week, that salary doesn't seem so great, does it? He also received benefits, and he left a career that he could have had a very lucrative future with. The argument number 3, NICA families should be thankful they don't have to pay taxes. Well, my rebuttal is this. It is my duty as an American citizen to pay taxes. I would still be in an extremely better financial position if the parent pay received annual raises and overtime pay for anything over 40, and I paid taxes on it. Some then argue the parent pay should then be a salary, therefore no overtime. Well, then the salary must be way more than a pathetic $15 an hour, especially to work 24/7. When physically not working, we are always on call. We always have to stop what we're doing. We always have to be available. Everyone I've come across in the medical industry who receives a salary, who is on call, receives an additional benefit for that on-call time, which is something we don't get. We don't want to be rich. We just want to be able to have the benefits and the same rights as other working families. We are treated differently as outcasts for so many reasons due to our kiddos' disabilities. Does our income or lack thereof have to be added to that laundry list? And I'll leave you with this. Pay rates shouldn't stay stagnant because the cost of living doesn't stay stagnant.
Any questions or comments from the board? Can you? Well,
Oh, sorry.
I wanted to ask just. So a family member that if the parent has a job, they can't get paid for.
That is no longer accurate. I
Okay, so that's-
believe that, in the past, so, and I wasn't around when this happened, but I think when the family care was first, put into statute, it was meant as income replacement. And I'm not justifying it, I'm just saying that that's what it was, and so I think the policy at the time was, you can't have another job. And I'm addressing some of that as I go back and do the retro pay, because I mean, even if you have another job, there are 24 hours in the day, and it's not like you're not providing 10 hours of care. So yes, that was the policy at the time. That was no longer policy. Now, what the policy that does exist, and you attest on the timesheet, is that you're actually providing care during the hours that you note on your timesheet as providing care.
That's reasonable. Okay. Yeah, just that kind of tweaked me a little bit, is it?
But it has been that way up until Melissa has made clarification. So now 20 years later, my husband, I mean,
Right.
not to mention, just that you're all aware, Brennan he's bedbound. And my husband just had emergency gallbladder surgery 5 weeks ago, so the kid hasn't been able to get out of bed. It takes 2 people, he weighs over 100 pounds of complete dead weight. He has 0 bend at his trunk unless you physically 2 people bend him. So there's no him helping us. He can't even use an eye gaze because of his brain damage. That he is very severe, and there's no going and getting a job. I mean, I don't know how someone could say that. Yes, maybe a work from home, so he's there. But at this point, he's been out of the workforce for 16
Yeah,
years.
I just wanted to, because that would have been.
Yes.
And you made very compelling points, and the rest of what you said, that just especially got my attention, especially.
That's how, and
Somebody
for me,
arrested
for myself,
for-
it's the same way, because when I entered into NICA, they told, when I left work, I was told that I could not work, even though they were only gonna pay me 10 hours a day at $10 or $15 an hour, I could not work any other way, and that's what I was told forever. And so I left working, and I had a license, a medical license. I left, I let it lapse. Then I was told, oh, you could have been, because you had that, we could have paid you for all of the hours. I didn't find that out until I had to get another license to be able to do that. So it was unfortunate that those things occurred. It was just a lack of communication clearly, but yeah, that's tough. And to go off of what she said, I understand. And I think for myself the reason that it's so important is the future. Just a little background for you guys. I was 19 when I got pregnant with Ian. I was 20. I was working part-time in a daycare. I was in school. I then had this baby that spent 4 months in the NICU. I could not work. I relied on my family to take care of me. When I did start working again, he went to a PPEC for a very short amount of time also. But when I left work, by the time that I left full-time employment, I didn't even have 5 years. So for me, if anything was to ever drastically change in my life, the unfortunate event that nobody ever wants to talk about is reality, because for me, whatever I've saved is all I have. And I have no work history. I have no social security. Nothing's paid in for me. So I have to save even more. I have other kids. What happens, my whole life falls apart. Like my car goes back, there's a lot of things. So I understand what it is. It's about the future. It's not about the actual $15 an hour. It's about knowing that I can live off of this money to take care of me, my kids, and the life that we live, and be able to save enough, especially with the way that the world is right now, and have something for my future. Because what happens if Ian does, I hope, live to be, old enough that I can no longer care for him. Now I'm too old to go back into the workforce, and I have only what I've seen. So it is a scary thing. And I think that Melissa and I have talked about it. It's the future that's scary. It's knowing that I have something for the future.
Right.
So just that's my own personal story. Sorry, I just wanted to let you guys know something from me personally also.
Let's, Dan.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
So my name is Dan Bookout. This is my daughter Arwen. And I just have a statement that my wife Jenny helped straighten out my gobbledygook, so it'll be far better. Good afternoon. I'm incredibly thankful to have the opportunity to address the board today. I'm also thankful for the hard work and positive changes that the board and NICA staff have been undertaking for the past year pertaining to the practice and organization of the plan. Prior to the birth of our daughter, my wife and I owned a successful graphic and web design studio. We continued running our business for a few years after Arwen's birth. However, as she grew, it quickly became more apparent that she would continue to require 24-hour care. Arwen's daily medical care, continual hands-on care for all daily living needs, and a continual one-on-one support to engage with and enjoy the fun things in life quickly took over our lives. Arwen is a joyful 7-year-old who loves to be around friends, read stories on her eye gaze, dance adaptive ballet, and devour pulled pork barbecue. In addition to her personal care, there is a constant onslaught of admin work, paperwork, and phone calls to manage a dozen pieces of equipment, multiple specialists, surgeries, time-sensitive medication refills, and several weekly therapy appointments. My wife and I found ourselves needing to care for Arwen 24 hours a day, and also one of us needed to tackle her admin work, which was the equivalent of a part-time job each week. Like many families enrolled in NICA, we have decided to administer the care medically necessary for our daughter's growth and development. We're blessed to have this opportunity, but as you are all aware, it comes with a share of hurdles and challenges. We love being Arwen's caregivers, but part of it wasn't a choice, since there's such a shortage of home health nurses, and we were repeatedly told that we wouldn't be able to get 24-hour care consistently provided by nurses in our area. Since we are Arwen's caregivers full-time now, we are not currently in the workforce, we're not achieving tenure, paying into Social Security, nor do we have access to 401ks or the like, since we don't have any earned income. Because of this, our families
financial future is far more uncertain and more susceptible to catastrophe. The parental pay rate hasn't been increased from my knowledge in over 15 years. And each year that it isn't increased, NICA families are suffering pay decreases since inflation continues to eat away at the value of our dollar. I'm fairly certain that the need for this increase is well known among board members and NICA staff. And I know that there is a significant desire to have a system in place where the stagnant parental pay is taken care of for the future as well as the present. A system that would continually and accurately be adjusted to keep up with cost of living increases. However, I'd say that there is an urgent need right now that the board can ameliorate by addressing the parental pay rate. 15 years is far too long to have a change. I would just ask that the board respond today, if possible, by not allowing the perfect to be the enemy of the good. We all want to have a system where we don't have to come back to this year and year and year, back and back and back, but instead, let's have a system we can work on in place where we don't have to worry about this in the future, but there's currently an urgent need right now that needs to be addressed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you, and thanks to all of you for being here. Yeah, it is good to see people in person. Sometimes, as much as I like Zoom. I take it the rest of the people here.
Yeah, so the rest of the people are the ones who filled out request to speak forms, and I think, how many people do we have?
Let's see, one.
Are there anybody who might want to talk that didn't fill one out? Because I feel like people had told me they wanted to speak, but they're not.
Well,
on the list.
I think we should at least call them the
Yeah,
people.
yeah,
who
no, of
did
course.
sign. So do you think, would it be easier, Matt, if we said who's, and I'm just calling these in order that people signed up, asked them to raise their hand so you can pick them out quickly? Okay, because how many people do you have?
We have,
Excellent.
okay, so we have, let me just, I do want to mention this real quick. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and Renee with you.
I have
There's
one.
9.
I can do that one if you want.
So, even if people limit their comments to 5 minutes, that's gonna be 45 minutes worth. Obviously, if people speak for 10 minutes, that's an hour and a half. I mean, at some point in time, I may have to ask people to keep their comments. We might just have to start at time, just so that we're not, because we do have other things we've got to get through. So just with that in mind, if you guys can just keep your comments as brief as possible. And the first name on the list is, I believe, is this Angel Phillips?
On him, I think,
Amiel
Ms. Phillips.
Ms. Phillips, you're recognized.
I do not see her on there. Do you see her?
I don't, but I don't know some of the names on there. I can't tell what they are. Yeah. If you told everybody who signed a thing to speak, press raise your hand on the Zoom. 2 of them did.
Yeah.
3 of them. 4.
We can go on.
There they go. Now they're raising their hands.
We'll come back, Ms. Phillips. Or who's the next one?
The Lamperts, I think, CC,
Lamperts, you here?
There's where I think it's.
oh, there she is.
Too.
CC got bad.
All right,
I'm here.
all right, you're recognized. Welcome.
Welcome, thank you. Kurt's here also, Tyler's dad. Yes, I do have to say thank you first to Melissa for stepping in. She's done some really great work and we appreciate it, I know for sure. But what the other 2 parents just said was basically, if I say anything more, I'm going to repeat exactly what they said, especially Melissa, the mom. I mean, and I believe our son is one of the oldest children in NICA now. He will be 27 next month. So it's been a long, long road for us, and for Tyler mainly, you know, we haven't stopped anything for him to continue to help him be a better Tyler. So I would waste everybody's time if I just repeated pretty much what Melissa just said, so I don't I don't feel that's fair, but exactly what she said is just exactly how we feel. And I can't think of anything else, you know, it was perfect. But we do us as, and also too, Tyler's also over the years, and us, he has been definitely had a whole lot more challenges, with Kenny, our prior director. Anyway, with a lot of unnecessary things that she has put us through, for sure. All of the NICA children are different. Brain injuries are different, but that doesn't mean they're any less. And it doesn't mean that our children don't suffer. They all just have different situations, and how we care for them. But so I guess our main concern is just the back pay, because we were always told that, you know, the bare minimum basically. And so we just wanted to speak out about that as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you for all the work. And we do see the changes and they are appreciated.
And we appreciate you're saying that.
Absolutely.
Next is Hagerstrom?
Hagerstrom's.
Hagerstrom's. I see you all with your hands up, so you're recognized.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
sir.
Yeah, I'm Robin Hagerstrom. We've been in the NICA program for 24 years. It's been quite a ride. Ashley, I think, summed it up about perfect. I was wanting to talk a little bit about the retroactive pay. We're excited for all the families finally getting a chance to get compensated for all the hard work that's gone on all these years. One concern I do have, though, is that what we have in NICA now is we have two different groups. We have the settlement family and we have the families that are receiving full pay. And the difference between the groups was NICA broke the law with the settlement families. And the other families, NICA felt they were mistreated and overrode the statute of limitations. The settlement families did not receive full compensation owed to them by law. It was approved by the court. NICA still refused to pay. It was just a horrible situation. Now, people that are outside the settlement are going to get awarded everything they were owed. So what I hope is that NICA will look back on the settlement families and see who was mistreated. It was quite a situation. And the other thing I wanted to address a little bit was the pay increase, which everybody's been talking about. And we all know that there's a shortage of nurses. We can't find nurses. The statute 766-301 states that NICA will pay for whatever's medically necessary. So what I hope NICA will do, will get away from these Medicaid rates, which don't work, and pay what's appropriately. I think NICA's in a situation to do that. So I hope that they'll just step up and pay what is necessary and reasonable rate to us. And but I thank Melissa and I thank the board. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate it. Input. Any board member have a comment or question? All right, thank you, sir. We're gonna move on. I'm pretty sure I saw Nina Wilcox on the list. Ms. Wilcox, you're
Yes, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, hi. My name's Nina Wilcox. My son is Nolan. He is 15 years old and profoundly medically handicapped due to a brain injury at birth. I am not a huge speaker, so I just have something that I'd like to read that I prepared ahead of time. I wanted to speak today on behalf of myself and my fellow NICA families about the potential of a pay increase for the parents who receive parental pay hours. Due to the circumstances that change the dynamics of our family, there are other factors to consider other than the baseline pay. While it is greatly appreciated and a blessing to our family, working outside the home is more of a challenge. NICA affords me the opportunity to be home with Nolan and still receive an income. However, Planning for things such as healthcare, retirement, etc., is something NICA families have to take into account and handle privately. I'm in no way asking NICA to handle my financial planning or offer things that an employer would. However, I am wanting to make a case for and show how a cost of living increase and potentially a higher parental pay could allow families the comfort to plan for those things. $15 per hour is now the state of Florida's minimum wage. The national inflation rate was higher than it has been in over 40 years this year. Our pay should be reflective of that. If our pay were to be reevaluated and more comparable to a job outside of the home, we could better afford the future planning for ourselves by applying some of our income to 401ks, annuities, etc. I understand our LPN and RN nurses went to school and worked hard for those degrees, but that was a choice they were able to make. When my son was born and brain injured, my life and my choices were altered drastically. Nursing isn't a career I would have chosen and still am not interested in having, but it's a job that is now required of me because of the level of care my son requires. I understand that I could choose 24-hour care from a licensed professional and then seek employment outside of my home in a field I would like. However, will that job allow me endless and unexpected personal leave every time my child is hospitalized for illness or requires surgery, or we receive an unexpected call out from a nurse? So what's in the best interest of my son and our family is that I stay home and care for him in the daytime hours. I literally take 14 hours of nursing to get rest. My nurse's shifts start at 7 p.m. and end at 9 a.m. That allows me enough time for a shower, sleep, and to get my youngest child off to school. I do the exact same job my nurses do in that 10 hours while getting paid $10 less an hour. But I carry the extra weight of that being my child, not a child I care for, although love. So while they are able to clock out after their shifts, I'm still carrying the weight of my son's vulnerability, hearing the machines and getting up to double check that everything is okay, worrying that maybe this virus will do the damage more than others, or will he come off oxygen by the morning to be able to attend church with our family? I am never able to fully clock out and often have to miss out on things with my husband and other children. I'm not saying this to ask for pity. I've come to terms with our life, but I say this to bring your attention that having a brain injured child is a full-time job, even when we are approved for nursing respite. I fully believe that we are not asking for more than what we are earning in caring for our children. I'd also like to take this time to address our nurses' pay. Currently, their pay rate is $25.40 an hour. I have 2 LPNs, so that's their rate. Our nurses are getting called weekly about job opportunities for $30 an hour, PTO, 401k with 9% match, and insurance with home health agencies. If our nurses choose to leave and we can't hire another because our pay isn't comparable, we, the parents, become the full-time nurses. For me, my son is severely medically complex with a tracheostomy, a G-tube, severe seizures, and a colostomy. He requires 24-hour around-the-clock care. If that falls all to me, our quality of life as a family and for Nolan himself diminishes greatly. I also know for me personally, I could write a book about the horrors of home health nurses in my home. So when we find reliable, honest, and compassionate nurses who care for our children with love and dignity, we want to ensure they stay with us. Offering them some type of incentive for their loyalty to our family would go a long way in ensuring we keep that continuity of care for our children.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Wilcox, any comments or questions from the board? We're for the board right now. Thank you very much, Ms. Wilcox. Who was Laura?
Laura Sikowski.
All right, Laura Sikowski, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can. Thank you. You're
All
welcome.
right. Thank you. I have a pre-prepared statement that I'd like to read. Hello, board members. My name is Laura Sikowski, proud mother of 8-year-old Sabrina. I wanted to share that I finally have a degree of trust with NICA, and I want to thank the board for hiring Melissa Jocks. Because of her leadership, the organization has already changed for the better. Melissa, I know we have given you challenges, and I see that you've handled them with reason and understanding, and we would be blessed to have you continue with NICA long-term. Parental pay remains an area of concern for my family and several other families in this program. As a member of the Parent Advisory Committee, I want to speak in the interest of all families. Families with NICA, participants in their 20s, families with one parent and no other caregiver, families with a sibling as the primary caregiver, because the parent is no longer able to provide care. Families living in a state with a cost of living twice the amount of Florida, and families in the first week home from the NICU. All of these families deserve a fair compensation for the work they actually perform for their loved one. At present, parents are compensated at the rate of a home health aide, a rate that hasn't changed in what I've learned more than 15 years. A rate that is lower than the starting pay of many current home health jobs. Realistically, the care of our loved ones is often outside the scope of practice for a CNA in the state of Florida. Our main responsibility is medication administration. Our caregivers regularly operate feeding tubes, perform trach suctioning, oxygen administration, seizure rescue intervention, care planning, and some of us have even performed CPR on our loved ones. I ask the board to compensate caregivers as you would a nurse. We are our loved ones' lifeline. Additionally, I ask that the pay rate have an automatic cost of living adjustment built in every year. When considering this, please also be mindful that many families no longer live in Florida. I'd like to share a perspective of how our lives change when we accept this family care pay. Many of us leave the lucrative careers that you've heard about, and we prepared for these careers our entire lives. The majority were not associated with healthcare. Yes, I had a replacement for my income, although it was less than my salary, but I found it worth the opportunity to stay with one of the most important people in my life. I lost my health insurance, my retirement matching, a very lucrative profit sharing, and I no longer earn the work credits towards Social Security. Because of this, I also request that NICA offer health insurance as an option for caregivers who are no longer working. The physical and mental health of family caregivers is crucial, and we remain the people who keep our loved ones the healthiest. Thanks for allowing me to speak today.
Thank you for being with us. Any comments or questions? All right, this is Sabrina. I saw her on the screen earlier. Sabrina Justice. Justice.
Yes.
All right, Sabrina Justice.
Hi there.
There, you're recognized. Welcome.
You hear us okay?
Yes.
Perfect. I wrote a statement for the sake of time. I know there's a lot of people talking today. So I'm just going to read through that. And some people have already touched on what I've said. I'm talking about something a little bit different than wages. So good afternoon, board members. I am Sabrina Justice. My son is Roman Barone. He's 13 and a half years old. We've been in NICA since 2010. He was severely brain damaged as everybody else's child here. It turned my world upside down, to say the least. So this is a really big topic amongst the parents and one that keeps many of us up at night. The thing that nobody wants to talk about. What do we do when the dreaded day comes that our child passes? For many of us, like those that have already spoken, we've given up our careers and our prime working years, in some part or completely, to stay home and devote our time and our attention to our kids. Much like if you're in a marriage where you choose to leave your career to raise your family and then end up getting divorced, oftentimes the spouse that stayed home will be awarded some type of alimony. I think it's important that we collaborate to come up with an alimony or severance package of sorts. Personally, I could find a job as a nurse, but I will be taking a big pay cut and basically going in at an entry-level position, even though I have almost a decade licensed. It's a decade that I've devoted to my child and lost the opportunity to build my clinical experience. The minute our child leaves this earth, we become unemployed. There's only so much that we can do to plan for this financially, and the investments that we have are supposed to be for our retirement. Yet another thing that we're losing out on by not working, building tenure, paying into 401k or retirement funds, insurance benefits, and paying into Social Security. We will hardly get anything from Social Security when we're 65 because we don't pay taxes. I realize that NICA has increased the death benefit, which is nice and appreciated. But let's look at it. Out of $50,000, minus roughly $15,000 for funeral expenses. After talking to other parents, that's about what they paid. Minus another 20 for a vehicle, since most of us have a NICA van. We'll have to give that back immediately or within 60 days, I believe. So we'll have to get a vehicle. So we now have about $15,000 left to carry us through until we're able to find work. This would cover about 3 months of our mortgage and expenses. And that's not taking into account time needed for grieving. The last thing I want to do is think about this day. And to be honest, I feel fearful, but also guilty that I even have to. I think for those of us that depend on our NICA income, while we are our child's lifeline, literal lifeline, our children have also become our financial lifeline, which in lies where the guilt stems from. No one should have to think of their child as their financial security, but we have been put in the position that we do. For these reasons, I would propose that NICA put into place a type of severance or alimony package for parents. My proposal, after discussion with other parents, is this. Upon the departure of a NICA participant, the previously paid parent will continue to receive a salary at a rate of 75% of their NICA pay for every year that their child lived, to coincide with every year that they lost being able to work in their chosen and educated career field. I appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, and I appreciate you bringing us a solution. Appreciate that. Any questions or comments? All right. Let's move on to the next one. I think I can read just fine. Jennifer Collins. Jennifer, Ms. Collins, if you're here.
Hi, how are you guys?
Good, we hear you fine. You're recognized.
Great, thank you. This is Aveline, my daughter. We've been in NICA since 2010. This is a very emotional discussion for us, as I gave up a very lucrative career to stay home and care for a child, and we have not received an increase in pay since we've joined NICA in 2010. She thinks it's funny. During that time, Social Security has seen 10 increases in COLA, and we have received 0. So every year our spending power goes down, and that's tough. So I urge you guys to think about all the wonderful families here that have talked about the fact that we live with 0 benefits, no health care, no 401k, no dental, and think about how much that costs us and how we don't really have the ability to go back in the workforce should something happen to our child, because I've now been home with Aveline for 12 years. And, you know, I can't go back to being a marketing executive. So I really appreciate all the changes that have happened with Melissa. I feel like we were lied to for many years by Kenny and the previous individuals within NICA. And I appreciate the honesty and the efforts that are coming now. And I thank you guys for your help.
Thank you, Ms. Collins. Any board members? Move on. We're I believe we have this is Trish Parrish. Okay, Trish Parrish, if you're with us, you are recognized.
I saw her.
Did you?
I did, yeah.
Okay.
There she is.
Wrong.
Hi. I saw him.
Who are you talking about?
No, I don't see her. That's a different person.
I thought I saw him.
All right, well, we can come
You want
back.
to see?
I saw him.
Okay, are you all on health, Phillips? On jail?
Yes.
Okay, we had you on the list and you are recognized. Okay,
I'm Angela Phillips. This is Jordan Phillips. We've been with NICA since 2020. He just turned 4 years old. I understand NICA is a business, but the fact that the business deals with children who their lives were altered. So at this point, we can't just operate just as a business. We have to have a heart in this business. Most people didn't want to be CNAs, didn't want to be nurses. My dream was to always become a nurse. Jordan is baby number 4 out of 5. Before, when I was pregnant with him, I was taking classes to get my nursing degree. And then he came along. I was taking classes, I was working for a corporate American company. I had my life planned out. And then he was born. My benefits I have with my corporate job, I got fired for having a child with a disability. And that put my family in a rut. I picked myself up, I became a CNA, I worked at the hospital before, at the time, I couldn't get parental pay, that's what they told me. I worked at the hospital, I took care of adults, just like Jordan, all day long. The nurses came to me to fix G-tubes. They didn't know how to do it, but I did, because I have a son with it. And it came to myself like, these people are getting paid more than me, and I know how to do things they can't do. I got off, I clocked off in the hospital, and guess what? I clocked right back in when I got home. So in all honesty, I was working 24 hours, 12 at the hospital, 12 at home. And my thing is the pay has to increase. And from some of the things that I've been told from certain people, and I know that they've made a change, it's almost like, you don't deserve to get money off of this. This isn't your get rich quick scheme. But we're not trying to get rich. I guarantee you, every single parent will give everything back to have the child that they're supposed to have. I will give that back plus anything else. So the least we could do is be able to live, be able to have health insurance, be able to be comfortable. And not just to pay the bills, we want to live, our kids want to live, they want real lives. We want to travel with them and the rest of our families. And my thing is, like I said, you have to have a heart. I've been told when we first got on with NICA, I got told we have nurses in our houses 7 days a week. I did this for 6 months without NICA. We did that with 4 kids. My husband worked 2 jobs, I worked 1 job. I don't know how I did it. I don't think I've recovered yet, and it's 4 years later. I got told by someone at NICA, and also you can't just call away the nurses just so you could get extra money. That's not how it works. Does anybody in this room knows what it feels like to have somebody that's not in your family, in your house, 7 days a week? And for someone to tell me I couldn't call away a nurse for 1 night, what if my kids don't want to see someone else in our house? What if me and my husband don't want someone else in our house? It's not just about money, it's about peace of mind. And I urge you, when you make these decisions, to not just think of a business, think of us as people. I'm late because he had a meltdown earlier this morning. We drove from Jacksonville. Nobody knows what that meltdown is like. So I couldn't leave my house until I got him situated. So it's not just business. We are really taking care of medically complex children every single day. Now, I have to rush back to Jacksonville because it's my other kid's open house. So I'm nurse, I'm mom, I'm everything, I'm all of the above. So I just urge you, I know it's business, but also have a heart when you're looking at these cases. If you don't understand what we're going through every day, ask. I'd rather my case manager ask and say, what's a day in the life like for you? So I can explain it to her. And secondly, I want to touch on housing. I appreciate it, and Melissa, thank you, we had a great conversation. The handbook hadn't changed. I had no clue that the money could be used for rent. I was told for 1.5 years, oh, we'll only help pay your rent if you move to a handicap accessible home. I found 0 rentable handicap accessible homes in Jacksonville. We went from paying $850 a month to $2,000. And no, we can't help you with that. So when I spoke to Melissa after we purchased a home, oh, you could pay your rent. Well, that would have helped me for 2 years straight. That's a big jump going from $850 to $2,000. And even getting a home loan, it seems like everyone is not on board when it comes to how we can do this. I brought Nadia Antoine with me. She was my mortgage broker. She helped me. We're reaching out tonight to try to help other families because it's different. The way we get paid is different. It's tax-free. They need a lot of things. And she's reached out to some people at NICA as well to try to help our families. And like Melissa said, this is a partnership. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it feels like we're signed up for welfare. It feels like it's like we're begging for things that we need for our child. We didn't ask for this. We traded any day. So if it's a partnership, let it be a partnership. Let us work together, not let it be like, well, I have to ask mom and dad for some money. I don't know if they're gonna say yes. But we need real partnerships that help our families with different things. Bring other people on. That's why I said, I brought her here. She knows how to get a mortgage done with it. I've met families who it's crashed through at the last minute because they had someone that may not have been versed in how to do it, or they may have not done it before. But I just ask that you guys take a hard look at the way that NICA is dealing with things. And not only is it a business, look at your heart and also really create a partnership with us and the families. That's all.
Thank you. Thank you for driving all the way. You're just busy person. Yeah. I'm gonna recognize Melissa.
So you and I had several conversations, and didn't we have to write several different versions of the letter? And yes, we're working on it, but I will tell you that every single family who needs a letter about their income, the people involved want us to say it slightly differently or not quite right. Yours fell through at the very last minute, right? But then you've got, then somebody else stepped in. It's we're aware, we're working on it. I don't.
No, that was the mine went through.
Did yours go through?
Yeah,
Okay.
mine went through.
I think we had one that fell through at the last minute, but then happened, and you know, we want you to call it income. We don't want you to call it income. The people involved in the lending industry, you know, NICA is different and have a hard time understanding what it is, and we do our best. But I think you talked to Tracy.
Yeah, I reached out to Tracy, and unfortunately what happens is you have a variety of different people with different backgrounds, depending on which lending institution that goes with, meaning the family. So for example, as an independent mortgage broker, the advantage I have is having the variety of different lenders I have the relationships with, as well as the expertise in underwriting guidelines. So for example, the benefits that the family receive is a lifetime benefit. So it would be equivalent as to someone who were retired, receives a pension, and if they were to pass, unfortunately, the next day, well, that's just unfortunate. Their benefit is for a lifetime. So it's no different for NICA families. With underwriting, I have to have a letter of explanation to explain that. So everybody isn't well versed with the guidelines, or everyone isn't a loan officer with that expertise. But as an independent mortgage broker, not only do I have the expertise and the flexibility, I'm familiar with the families, and these families need someone to advocate for them. I had to move Angel Phillips' file to another lender, and we closed in 7 days. She was able to close in time, but it was because of my due diligence and ability to have a conversation with underwriting to point out where the guidelines are and why these issues should not be. So this is the issues that I hear oftentimes that is so unfortunate, because these families shouldn't have to endure having difficulty securing a home loan. It's really, really challenging in the beginning, although just because you're buying a home in the first place is challenging, and then they have the families that they're dealing with their children. So that's why I'm here to support Angel.
Thank you for being here. Comments, questions, for? All right. Let's see, I see some folks with their hands raised. I don't believe we've gotten to, I see these are people that are not pre-register, and I'm having a real hard time
The top one you want to read, it says Trisha Roth.
Tricia Roth.
Yep, that's the top
Okay.
left corner.
All right.
Yeah.
Tricia Roth, you are recognized. And if you'll just tell us what your name got cut off on the screen, so I'm not sure what the last name was.
She's still muted.
Yeah, you're still muted. Matt, do we have her muted on our end? And it's
Yeah, she'll need to unmute on her side.
Tricia, if you would unmute on your end, I believe we've got you unmuted here. Still muted. Here. Tell you what, we're gonna come back to you. Let me, let's move on to, Jason Wilburn, I believe, if I'm reading the screen correctly. Matt, if you're on mute.
Hello.
All right, we hear you. So
Hello.
you're-
Yep. I was just wanted to because everything that everybody said has been dead on. It's amazing how I can I haven't met any of these people, but what they saying is like the exact same thing. Circumstances are really just thinking like how I've been thinking. And my son is Jason Wilburn. He has cerebral palsy. He has microcephaly, epilepsy, and I'll tell you, he's total care. And anybody who's taking care of a child like that, they're not doing CNA work. They're doing RN work. And so I'm not able to go get a license, it's a RN license or anything like that because I don't have a high school diploma or anything. So I wouldn't, if I could get an RN license, I would, but I'm not able to. And I mean, it's just like you're not doing CNA work. You're just not doing it. You're giving medicine, you're doing therapy with your child. It's 24 hours. It's not that you mind doing it. You don't mind doing it at all. But I mean, if you're going to compensate somebody, it is not CNA work. And like they were saying with when your child, you hate to think about it, but the doctors tell you that life expectancy for some of your children is not long. And what are you going to do when you haven't been working for like 10, 15 years, and then your child does die, and you still have two other children, and you have a mortgage? What are you going to do? And it's just, I think that that needs to be thought about. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. I'm gonna go on. I see, and we've heard from Jackie Ameren. We've heard from you in the past, but you are recognized if you wish to address the board. Welcome back.
Hi. Sorry.
We can hear you.
Hi, and I'll apologize in advance if you can hear my daughter's crying in the background, but she's fine. She's just crying. I think everybody covered a lot of points, and I just won't speak very long, but I just wanted to bring up something that I think has been mentioned, but really hasn't been shined a spotlight on. Is that, Laura brought up the cost of living, and I think it was Ashley who mentioned, paying double on vacation because you have to pay sometimes for double the hotel rooms and double the whatever just to take your kids somewhere. And I think that everybody's brought up really excellent points, including how exhausting. And I really don't think anybody can really explain to anyone who doesn't live this life how mentally and emotionally draining it is to be on call 24 hours a day and often be between your own child and the D word. But I think it's hasn't really been said as clearly as it could be that so much of the money goes to our kids. Like in my case, I live in South Florida. I do not have a handicap accessible home because I cannot afford one. And the housing benefit that NICA offers won't even help me with the down payment. And I cannot take on a mortgage based on my NICA pay, because what if, God forbid, something happens to my daughter and then I can't make my mortgage? And so we have to save towards a home that is handicap accessible. My daughter, thankfully is 4 and small for her age, but we do not live in a home where we're going to be able to put lifts in the ceiling and carry and use machinery to help us lift her. We do not live in a home where we can wheel a wheelchair to the bathroom. The wheelchair is not going to get to the bathroom. And so these are the kinds of things where I think it's also worth saying, not only are you working 24 hours a day, not only are you working for an amount of money that no one would agree to work 24 hours a day for this kind of mental health. Like if you went to your therapist and said, this is what my work life is like, your therapist would be like, you need to quit that job for your own mental health. But we do not get to quit. But on top of that, so much of the money goes back to our kids. If I want to take Vera to see Christmas lights at Christmas because she loves lights, I'm going to pay a lot more than I would pay for my 2-year-old neurotypical kid to go, because I have to pay for all these extra things to make that trip something we can manage. And often, even though I'm getting paid $15 an hour, I am paying out of my own pocket someone to come with me to help me with her. So I really think that the pay is not enough, especially if you consider there's no benefits, there's no retirement plan, there's no severance package. It's really hard to enter, but it's really like, I really don't think that the amount of money we make is enough to care for our children, because they are still expensive as all get out, even after all the wonderful benefits we get from NICA. And I have literally not tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of housing costs ahead of me to make an accessible home for my daughter. And I do not make enough money to pay for that, even after NICA's help. So that's all I wanted to add to the conversation. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you very much. There we go. If we can, let's try, Matt, if we can try Tricia Roth. We can get back and see if we can get her unmuted. All right, we are. What's the last? Can you read? Can anybody read?
McCarter.
McCarter. McCarter. Okay, Tricia Roth McCarter.
Can we say something about something that Jordan's mom said earlier? Is that right?
Well, we'll wait for the.
You
We get her
mentioned-
unmuted. I'm gonna.
You said the words there, NICA as a business. But NICA's business is taking care of these children now that they have a brain injury, and we waived our right to sue the doctor in the state of Florida. That's NICA's business. So an increase in parental pay because we are nurses is part of NICA's business. It's part of what they should be doing as a business to take care of these children. You don't know what you're getting into when you sign your rights away, and then you have a brain injury child due to malpractice or negligence, which we all have. And so that is NICA's business. And so the fact that we're having this discussion still, and it's not increasing the pay, it's just part of the job, NICA. And I appreciate you saying it like that, Because NICA's entire business is taking care of these children. That's what it was created for. That's what it needs to be. And for a long time, it wasn't that. In the, previous, administration, it was not that, but now we're writing that. So I think that's part of the business of NICA now. So thanks for saying that. It resonated a lot with me.
And Matt, so do we have Ms. McCarter unmuted on our end?
Here, yes.
Okay, Ms. McCarter, can you just check and make sure on your end and well, now she's square on it. She may be having connectivity issues, and that's the downside. Virtual. All right, so Renee, I'm gonna recognize you. And then if at any point in time during this meeting, if she comes back, we'll go back to her, and then there's one other Trish Parrish.
I have her, she actually sent me a message because she was having difficulty with her connection, so she just sent me something also. Actually, I'll read hers first, because she
Okay,
just
so
said-
you're recognized for Trish and then the other person.
Okay, Trish had sent this is what she said. I'm overwhelmed with the compassion and strength and intelligence of my brothers and sisters who have spoken today. There is nothing I could say today that would enhance their words. I implore you to consider all the points considered and take any feasible and financially appropriate action that can be made. Thank you for hearing us. Thank you for being the rebuild in our trust. That was from Trish Parrish. And then I also have something from
Hey,
another parent.
Renee, let's, I want, in the interest of striking while the iron's hot, I see that we have Ms. McCarter unmuted, so Ms. McCarter, if you can hear us, you're recognized.
I'm sorry that difficulty came up for a little bit. I actually was not going to speak today, but after listening to everybody, I really wanted to share my story. So I don't have anything prepared. But I did want to share my story because I know at the beginning, before you guys started talking about like parental pay and such, you guys put out numbers, which I think is really important, of like what family, like the pay that families are getting and how it works and all that kind of stuff. I did want to bring to everybody's attention divorce rate in special needs families. Sorry, I'm not gonna get emotional, I'm gonna be fine. So divorce rate is about 90%. So for being realistic, a lot of us have either gone through divorce or are thinking about going through divorce. I know that there's a lot of strong NICA families that are still together, but there's some that do need to get divorced. So in saying that, I think that it was mentioned, like my ex-husband is a nurse, so he gets paid like the parental rate, he gets paid like as a nurse. But I still get paid like the $15 an hour. And I only have 50% custody of my son. So I get paid only 2 weeks out of the month. So so my parental pay was cut in half, but I did have to find a home that was suitable for my son. He's 15 years old, wheelchair bound, like super medically complex, very severe. He has a appendixostomy, a feeding tube, like seizures. He's fully catheter. He's on a suprapubic catheter. So I cannot find a job out. I know that I'm without him for a week, and then I do have him for the next week. So I do have him every other week. But my issue I'm running into is that I can't go outside of the home and still work, because when I do have him, I'm a single mom and I have him full time. And I also have 2 other children. So I just wanted to bring it to y'all's attention, like also families that like go through divorce. I know another mom like had mentioned it, and I think that was really awesome that she did that. So I just wanted to bring it to your attention because I think it is something that some of us do deal with, and we are very limited to what we get through NICA because, like I said, I do have to stay home when I do have my son and be with him. I only have a nurse 3 or 4 nights a week. So I'm with him, you know, a lot, and he needs me. I can't, I can't just, you know, go away from him and go get a job outside of the house. Also, I'm in an area that with nursing, there's not a lot of choices. My nurse travels an hour to get to us. And also he's thinking about not being our nurse anymore because his pay he's getting a lot more offers that are, you know, of higher pay. So anyways, I just wanted to bring it to y'all's attention. I didn't sign up to, you know, speak today, but I did want to say that after you guys like talked about the numbers and, you know, the amount of money that we get each year. That's all.
Thank you, Ms. McCarter.
Thank you.
And Renee, I know you had one other statement
Yes.
to read off on behalf of the parent.
Okay.
And then we're just, for everybody's benefit, we're gonna take a real quick break after this and then dive back into the rest of our agenda after that.
Okay. It says, good morning. My name is, well, this person is Jennifer McCray and her daughter is Aubrey. She's been in NICA program since a young age. She's 20 now. My concerns for the program going forward is the stagnant rate of parental pay, which has stayed the same for nearly 14 years. Being Aubrey's mom is one of my greatest blessings that God has given me in this life. Having said that, it's also one of my greatest fears. Trying to manage her care while providing for our family is an everyday struggle that is always weighing on my mind. Having a special needs child is like running a marathon. There's no breaks and it's all endurance and preparing for the next battle. Aubrey is in need of constant one-to-one attention. She is highly mobile, yet amongst other things, she does not understand danger, making constant supervision crucial. In fact, she needs assistance in most every aspect of her life. We live in a rural community. Probably like many families, there are no day programs or the like, which Aubrey could participate in. She has been on the Med Waiver Program waiting list for over 10 years, and we've been told that there is little likelihood that she will get on the program due to funding cuts. They only take at-risk families. Therefore, because we have always and always will make sure Aubrey is safe, we are not being provided with the programs which would be available, such as the Life is Good program. A program such as this would allow for part-time work while ensuring that Aubrey is safe. However, that is simply not a reality. The reality is that her dad and I are scrambling to make ends meet and take care of our daughter. It seems that the older she gets, the more difficult it gets to take care of her, and the feelings of isolation continue to grow. My point to this letter is to ask you to please raise the parental pay to an amount which we can live on without scrambling each and every month. We need to know that we are not alone and that the NICA board has our best interest at hand. We all can see that the economy has changed, for $15 an hour simply not enough to provide the basic needs for a family. I argue that the parental pay should be at a minimum 20 per hour, but preferably closer to 25 per hour. Being full-time caretakers for our children is challenging and all-consuming. If we did not constantly have to worry about making ends meet, our care could be more focused on what is truly important, which is keeping our child happy, safe, and healthy. I am an attorney, but I'm extremely limited with what I can do to the time constraints of her constant care. I also obtained my CNA certificate to be better educated in Aubrey's needs. Since that time, I've been flooded with job offers, some of which I have forwarded to the board as I have pleaded for parental pay raise these last several months. Some of the CNA positions pay $31 an hour with a sign-on bonus plus incentives such as paid sick days and healthcare. However, there are no employers that would allow me to bring Aubrey with me, nor would it be safe to do so since she is immunocompromised. I feel that an additional raise to those of us with licensure to better provide for our kids is necessary and fair. Certainly as board members, you all want to see NICA families thriving despite the state of our economy. While our children are our whole lives, this is not a position that we chose to be in. Changes in the state of the economy justify changes in the program, especially since the funding is readily available. I regret that I'm unable to attend this meeting, and I sincerely thank you for your consideration in this matter. Should you require any further, please do not hesitate to ask. Thank you, Jennifer McCray.
All right, thank you. All right, that.
We have another hand up, John Romy.
All right, and Mr.
I saw you.
Romy, And he'll be our last speaker at this point. So, Nat, if you'll unmute him and, Mr. John, you are recognized.
For recognizing me. The last name is Romine, not Romine, just so we're clear. It's okay. It happens a lot. I wasn't going to speak as well as Trisha, like she said, but one thing I wanted to bring up, there are a lot of families, obviously, that are divorced and have 50-50 custody. In our situation, it's the same. Luckily, her mom and I are very close, so we are able to work together like some families probably can't. Recently, I was disabled for 3 months, so I was without pay for 3 months. Savings goes quick when that happens. Luckily, Becky was able to fulfill the full-time position, if you will, and take care of Lauren. Meanwhile, I was completely without pay for 3 months. I brought up to the case manager before about not being able to qualify for any type of short-term disability like AFLAC or something similar, because technically we are not employed, so we just do not qualify. One of the things I would like to see the board address is somehow coming up with a plan to offer that program to us for situations like that. So, you know, if Becky was to get hurt and I was to get hurt at the same time, we would obviously have to have a nurse and we would have to forfeit all of our pay. And that would obviously be very detrimental to our situation. So I brought it up more than once and I would love to hear some thoughts on that as well. So that's all I have to say, and I appreciate everybody's commitment to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Romine. All right, so let's, why don't we take 15 minutes and 15 minutes, and I'm gonna be, okay. I'm not very far behind it. 15 minutes, so 15 minutes will be 3:57.
307.
I mean, 3:07. 3:07. Start back up, because we are going to have a hard time.
This lightning round?
Yeah, this will be lightning round. For the executive director report.
All right.
Wonderful. Our favorite person.
Okay. So what I did is I went back through the minutes from the last two board meetings, and I'm going to update you only on things if something has changed or if I failed to meet a deadline that I committed myself to. If nothing's changed and something I presented on before, I'm not going to repeat it. You're going to see presentations on where our investments are. You're going to get a report from our actuaries. You're going to see our financial statements. I'm going to pull it all together once we're through all those reports. So if you get lost, don't worry, we'll come back to it. Quick update, we got all but 20 of the retroactive parent awards out. Very exciting. We even made contact with some families who we weren't able to get in touch with for the death benefit last year when that increased. So very happy about that. I am very close to getting a medical director on board. Dr. London put me in touch with some people who put me in touch with the Florida Medical School Quality Network connected to USF. They have put out an RFI. So we will have a contract medical director who has resources in all specialities to be able to assist us. So I think that's a very, very exciting thing. We have engaged HMA, the Health Management Associates, to assist us with the transition off of Medicaid. For those of you who don't know, Beth Kidder is a former Medicaid director here in Florida for a very long time. And she is helping us identify all of the things that we would not possibly have thought of, all of the potential unintended consequences of moving our families off of Medicaid as primary. They are having calls. They already had a call with Parent Advisory Committee. They're reaching out to some families this week and next week who've agreed to speak to them about their Medicaid benefits. This is a slow roll. We're not gonna, I know that this is a big deal to a lot of families. We're gonna do this thoughtfully. We're gonna work with AHCA on care coordination. And, you know, it's complicated, but don't panic. Last time I told you that we were gonna have EOBs ready by July 1. EOBs are ready. I am the one who has dropped the ball on that. I need to get them to,
Real quick,
sorry, explanation of benefits. So that was one of the criticisms, is that NICA never produced anything to families saying, here's what you asked for and here's what we paid. So they're ready. I have one run for every member of the parent advisory committee. I just need to get them to you to take a look at, to see if they make sense, and then we're ready to roll it out. I mentioned, I think last time, we have two new nurse case managers. I sent an email out to families asking who might be willing to change case managers, and that was an overwhelming, I don't want to change case managers. So we're gonna have to be, I got these two over here said, we will if we must. So we got to be really thoughtful. I mean, changing case managers is difficult and traumatic for families, and our two new case managers are fantastic. And so, you know, the new families coming in go to a new case manager, but we still got to figure out how to manage that workload a little bit better. I am working, as you all authorized last time, on the family care retro. It is taking me a long time, but I expect to make all those payments by the end of September. I've contacted about half of those families, just saying, here's my understanding, here's what it looks like your experience was. I have to talk to them on the phone sometimes, because sometimes it's not that clear, but I'm working through that. I do want to, as a couple, the Lamperts and the Hagerstroms were referring, maybe it wasn't clear to you all. So for families coming into the program now, and for families who aren't class action, as you authorized the retro pay for, we're going back to date of NICU discharge, because I believe it's the right thing to do, as do you. The class action families entered into a settlement agreement with regard to family care. And I think what they've said to me is, while they're certainly pleased that new families coming into the program are seeing a much different program, a better program. You know, they've been in the program 20+ years and fought for 20 years. And I think it's very difficult for them to think about what they went through and to see what people are getting now, and to feel like that they're not getting a lot of that. Ashley's a class action family as well. And so what I am doing, what I have committed to them, is even within that class action, there are opportunities to increase hours. And I'm not sure that they were always afforded the opportunity to increase their hours under the parameters of the settlement agreement. So what I've committed to those class action families is that I would go back and review that as soon as I'm done getting through this particular retro. But I don't think it's just so much the family care. It's that, you know, they feel like they went without a lot of reimbursements because NICA wouldn't pay them in the past, that families today just don't have to worry about. I committed to them that I would bring that to your attention, but that's what families were referring to who spoke. I do.
Can I interrupt? I just did, do you guys know the difference between the class action families and the
I actually
other?
wrote that down.
I figured maybe an explanation. I don't know if we've ever actually said why there was a difference, or.
So when, and Steve can jump in, when family care was put into statute, there was
Limitation on 20 hours.
there was a limitation 10 hours a day, and the class action family said, well, we were already in the program, you can't benefit a limit that you can't limit a benefit that we already had. So there was a settlement agreement. And so what the benefit that the class action families did receive is they were not subject to the 10-hour limit starting in basically 2005. But they were not compensated for anything prior to 2005. But again, that was part of the settlement agreement at the time. I think a lot of them had shared with me that they felt they had no choice but to sign the agreement, because what else were they going to do? So again, I told them that I would bring their concerns, and I will go back and make sure that they were treated appropriately.
Thank you. So the defining line too, right? It was like June
2002.
Yeah, 2002. So the people prior to that were class action. the people after that or not, just so that there's, for me, I know, but I knew to understand that divide where it runs. So you know, when they're saying it, why it sounds like that.
Can I ask the question? Did everyone take class action of that DOB?
One family who's currently in our program opted out.
Okay.
I think some others did, but they're no longer in the program, but only one family.
That's, okay, thank you.
Legislative agenda. I've been working with the Parent Advisory Committee on what we might want to pursue with legislation this year. We really have 4 areas. One I call technical, one cost of living, one positive momentum changes, and the other is maturation changes. Technical, for those of you who hadn't read the statute in a while, everything says child. 90 of our 225 participants are adults. The statute is written so focused on children and needs of children, which it should be, but we have a lot of adults in our program now. So we really need to take a look at the wording and the language and whatever else we might need to update to reflect the program as it is today. The parents have asked, similar to the cost of living adjustment that got put on parent award, they're asking for that to be put on a housing benefit and the death benefit, since those are the 2 other that are defined by amount in statute. There are obviously some other cost of living issues that we heard about today. Positive momentum changes, we've talked about the balance of, you don't want statute to be too prescriptive about benefits so that it removes your ability, but to put in statute some benefit changes that you all have already approved, that we've implemented. For example, the mental health benefit for families after a participant passes away. You approved us to move forward with that. We need to get that in statute. The reliable transportation benefit that we've revamped a little bit, we need to clean that up in statute. Dental services, we are, that was one of the ones that was in Booksville last year. We covered dental services. We just need to get that statute. I think it's all about, let's make sure this doesn't happen again. Let's make sure that all the positive changes are as cemented as they can. And maturation changes. I think you heard a lot about, as I mentioned, 90 of our participants are adults, which means we have aging parents, which means we have different challenges. One of the ideas is, do you re-up the housing benefit? Right now, the housing benefit is $150,000 one time. That's it. So
just that also is 150,000.
It's 100.
That's 100.
100.
Okay, so the 100, that's inclusive of environmental modifications. Okay.
What to do if your child dies? They're right. If your child dies, you are immediately without income. So is there, and I don't believe that, I think the death benefit was really meant to cover only costs related. I don't think it was meant to cover living expenses, but I think we do need to talk about that and how we might address that. One of the issues is, well, I now have a 25-year-old living in my house and I have to buy food, and I did not expect to do that. And so that is an additional cost. So should we get a food stipend? Just lots of things about having adult participants in this program that we might want to address. But that is not fully, that legislative agenda is not fully formed. I would not move forward on that without board approval. But I just wanted to kind of let you know how it was taking shape. That's it.
Any questions of Melissa?
I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what she said about how important I think the increased housing benefit would be later, because you think people who took that housing benefit when their child was 5 to make their house accessible is great. But what happens when their child turns 30? They're too old to take care of them, and now maybe a sibling does. So now you're out of a house, your income, everything you have for their sibling to be in that house, or the sibling has to now create an environment where that person can live with them with no additional help to make that available. That is something to think about. And I think, like we've talked, is that they were children and babies for so long, and now they are adults. And I think about it often because I know I built my house for Ian and for whoever is going to be where they're to take care of him. So that's another reason why for me, it's important in my future, because I know I won't be able to live in that house if one of my kids is his full-time caregiver, because that house was built for him. Everything in that house was made for him.
Just real quick on that, I usually present more questions than answers, but most people are not required to live in the same home forever. Our homes are not valued at a higher rate. Actually, sometimes they're devalued because it is such a turnoff for all of the changes we have to make. And so basically, NICA is saying you have to live in this house forever, or if you move, and a lot of people do move. There's a statistic about every 4 years a family changes homes, and we're stuck. So that's just something to bring up as well about the housing benefit.
I'm sorry. Anything else on the CEO report?
No.
Benefit handbook, Melissa, you are. Now let's begin.
All right, after much hard work, we have a benefit handbook that I think is in a good enough shape for the board to approve it. Dr. London, thank you so much. You're still on. Thank you so much for your suggestions. I think what I will do moving forward is if you all approve this benefit handbook, I think what we will do is have an addendum where we're just tracking ongoing changes, but we only update it once a year. I think we've been posting about once a month as we update, and I think it's been confusing for people because I don't know, they don't have time to stare at the benefit handbook as we post it on our website all the time. So I think we'll just keep an addendum of, and it isn't, I mean, we're not down to drastic changes without approval of the board. So it's really just refinements and clarifications. So I'll keep those separate, and then in a year, you all will have the opportunity to approve another benefit handbook. But I think it's important to get one that's approved by the board.
Let me just ask for any of the parents that are here, have you all seen the proposed benefit handbook?
I've been reviewing it. I'm also part of the parent advisory committee, and so I have been ongoingly reviewing it, and obviously the changes are definitely much appreciated for the benefit.
So your recommendation would be that we accept that.
Absolutely.
And any other?
Mr. Chair.
Yes, sir.
I'd like to acknowledge and thank Melissa for her leadership on this issue, as well as the rest of the team. I think this iteration of the handbook is a vast improvement of what existed before. I've looked at it in great detail, and I apologize again for my technical limitations today. I have some technical grammatical comments, but in terms of the general subject and organization, I think it's a vast step forward and a firm foundation for future iterations. So thank you in advance. I expect this to be approved, and the whole team did a great job.
Good, thank you, Doctor. Any other comments or questions from the board? All right. So I think we have a consensus that we have a.
We need a motion?
I believe we do. Yes.
I would make a motion to approve the handbook as stated as drafted in our board book.
All right, and Dr. London, I think you were second.
Second.
Okay, so I think we have a consensus here. So is there objection? All right, so let's show that motion adopted without objection. All right, now to the fun, interesting stuff. Next up is our investment update. I believe our presenter here. Well, we have Felicia, who is here in person, and Katie via Zoom. And Felicia, I'm going to start with you since you're here, and you can trade off with Katie as you need to.
Katie,
Yeah, I see her.
unmuted? Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm Felicia Bennett. I'm with Wilshire Advisors. We are the external investment consultant to NICA. We work with a number of institutional investment programs. We assist with asset allocation, the implementation of the policy, performance reporting, etc. Katie Wojciechowski is your internal investment consultant based in Tallahassee. I'm based out of Wilshire's Pittsburgh office. And together we liaise with the board and the investment managers. Is Katie on?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, now.
Okay, perfect. It wasn't allowing me to unmute. Please, and I apologize for being virtual today, and thanks to Felicia for being in person. Please let me know if you can't hear me clearly, and I'll just pass the baton to Felicia. We've talked about this. I'll try to be brief, and I know sometimes we speak in acronyms, so please speak out if I miss one. Just a couple of opening comments, and we'll hand it back and forth. Felicia told you who we are. It's very important that we monitor our managers to ensure that we have a durable investment portfolio, that they're following the risks that we've set out, that we've planned for, especially given the last 6 months, which Felicia is going to highlight in a minute. Through tough times, it's even more important that we make sure that they're following the plan and sticking to the risks. Prior to this year, we had multiple years of outsized positive returns, and we benefited from that. All market sectors performed well as central banks pump liquidity into the economy. We are in the midst of good news. The pandemic is largely behind us, but now the Fed is also going to be withdrawing that liquidity, and we're in the throes of that right now. So Felicia, I'm going to hand it back to you if you want to just kind of highlight where we are.
So some of the charts that we have in here just give a little bit of context about the market environment, because it's really been quite unprecedentedly negative. The worst market we've seen in about 40 years in the bond market, and as well as inflation rising faster than there's been a lot of discussion about inflation, the wage that we were discussing earlier. So if we look at the first slide, which is 58 of 286, showing all the markets faltering, we show treasuries, which are fixed income on the left, and equities on the right. And you can see a dotted line drawing back to an equivalent time period. So back to really the beginning, 1788 for bonds and 1932 for equities in terms of the size of the drawdown in the markets. And the next slide gives a little reason behind that. It's really this abrupt shift in the fiscal and monetary policy response to the inflation environment. This chart shows the Federal Reserve rates, and you're probably all aware that the Fed has been raising interest rates. The Fed controls the short end, the cash rate. And that chart you can see from June 17, the Fed was slowly starting to raise interest rates, and then the pandemic hit, and it was sort of stair step up and then elevator ride down. The Fed very aggressively lowered interest rates to near zero. So that means you earned nothing on your bonds, and that stayed that way until we saw these outsized prints of inflation at 9.5%, well above the Fed's 2% average target. So they shifted course and started raising rates, raised rates 25 basis points, and then 50 basis points, and then 75 basis points, and then another 75 basis points. So that's 2.25% interest rate raising. And what they're trying to do is slow down growth, to slow down demand, to slow down inflation. And they're trying to do this after they pumped a tremendous amount of liquidity into the markets to stimulate the economy, keep the economy running during the pandemic period. So in addition to raising rates, they're also pulling liquidity out of the market. The Fed added $4.5 trillion of liquidity to the market, and now they've stopped buying those bonds and stopped supporting the economy. So we're going through a very hard foot on the brakes for the Fed, and the markets did not react positively to this. So the next page takes you back to maybe some statistics classes. If you saw that these are plots of interest rate changes on the bottom, the horizontal, and then returns on the vertical. And on the left side, it's long interest rates, and most of the portfolio, 40% of the portfolio, was invested in long duration bonds. And long duration bonds are very sensitive to changes in rates, as it's just bond math. This line shows you the explanatory power of the changing rates on a bond return. It's 91% of the price of the bond, of returning the bond, is explained by changes in rates. And you can see the orange dots. Those are the 2 last quarters that we've seen. So some of the worst that we've seen over this entire period, going back to 72.
So bonds, interest rates rise, bond prices fall. That's just the way it works. And the opposite happens when the Fed lowered rates and rates lowered, we had good returns from bonds. Equities react one of two ways. If there's a little bit of inflation, that's actually good for stocks. That means the economy is growing. When inflation runs high, it can be bad for the market sentiment. So the orange dots you see in the bottom right corner show that it was one of the, two of the worst quarters we've seen for equities in the last 25 years too. So pressure on both sides of the portfolio, pushing values down. So the next page shows the position of the portfolio at June 30. The pie chart shows the asset allocation, and that's something that we work on and model and recommend to the board. It's actually the most important decision the board makes in terms of the assets is that asset allocation policy. It's going to explain 90% of the return and risk of the portfolio, how much you're allocating to stocks versus bonds versus other assets. And you can see in this chart that the yellow piece of this pie is long duration fixed income. NICA's liabilities, the cash flows that are paid out, are very long lived. And thankfully, that liability, that duration is extending because the participants are living longer. So that's actually a good thing, but it increases the length of those cash flows. And the portfolio is positioned in a way to try to line up the assets with those cash flows. There is still equity in the portfolio. 17% in US stocks, 16% in non-US stocks. There's a little bit of cash because of the cash flow needs. This policy was set several years ago before the changes and we've been wanting to do more current modeling and the asset allocation, but we were waiting for all of the changes in statute and the pending litigation to be settled so that we had a good picture of what those future cash flows are. So that's coming. That'll be presented to the board in a future meeting to see if this mix of assets is the most appropriate to try to meet those cash flows. But you can see where we were at the beginning of the year, just under $1.7 billion at the end of June. We had paid out almost $50 million in benefits and one-time retroactive payments. And the biggest number you see here is a negative $334 million of unrealized market loss. So that's not realized losses, but the decline in value to show market value at the end of June of $1.317 billion. The next page is something that we're monitoring on a regular basis. That's the compliance with the asset allocation. The board sets that allocation. There's an investment policy that controls, sets rules around how that investment is to be implemented. And we monitor that every quarter with a chart like this, where we're looking at what is the target, what are the allowable ranges around that target, and do we need to take action to make sure that we're consistent with that policy. You can see in this page, there is one asset class that falls outside of the allowable range. That's core fixed income. The markets have moved us back. The reason it was overweight because it had gone down less than the other assets in the portfolio. The improvement in markets since the end of June have moved other assets up and moved this back in line with policy, but it's something that we're monitoring regularly. I'll turn it over to Katie just to run through some of the performance, but see if there are any questions on just how the assets are allocated.
Okay. Can somebody drive for me?
The weightage for international versus US equities 50-50. Typically, most retirement portfolios have less weightage on international equities and more weightage on US equities. Is that designed?
That is intentional, and it's based on our forward-looking bull market expectations of US and non-US equity and the diversification that we still see from non-US equity. That is something people test in the upcoming study.
Sorry, any other questions? All right, we want to turn it over to Katie then.
Yes.
Katie.
Okay. All right. Whoever's driving, can you advance it one page for me, please? Great. So this is our over several periods, our performance. And as you can see, and I'm sure you saw in the chart where we have reduced market value, we were especially challenged in all sectors over the past quarters, year to date, definitely. And as I mentioned before, while we enjoyed several very good years, we've wiped out several of those years on a mark-to-market basis at this point. We don't tap this for in general for cash flow needs, and that, as Felicia mentioned, we're a little we'd like to look at our asset allocation based on some changes. So we maybe that may change, but in general, if you look on a longer horizon, we are still in decent shape and according to our plan. If you could advance it another page, please. One thing that has been challenged, the active managers through time have been additive to performance, and by active I mean managers who seek to exceed the returns of their sector. So equity managers performing better than the benchmark that is laid out for them, and generally through time that has been additive. But again, in this incredibly challenged year so far, they have suffered. Now, we look at them on a much longer horizon than the last quarter or the last year even. And so we look for a longer eye to focus on, because that's the horizon that we charge them to invest. If you could advance to the next slide. If you remember the pie chart, the largest portion of our portfolio is in long maturity, long duration credit portfolio. It's 40% of our portfolio, has had some great years. And incredibly challenged this past year to date, and really the past 12 months. The chart on the left will show you kind of the performance so by year. The chart on the right shows the pluses and minuses, the up and the down years. And as you can see, it's still been additive over the past decade, but certainly been a challenged period. If you wouldn't mind just advancing. And this just shows, I touched on this, where we're active and where we're passive. So there's a lot of areas of the market that are incredibly efficient, and we try to invest passively or just replicate what the expected performance is in that sector. In our non-US portfolio, we do think there are some inefficiencies that we can garner some excess returns in those areas. And those portfolio managers are active, and the few areas in our bond portfolio are also active. So, Felicia, I'm going to hand it back to you for the attribution.
Thanks. The next few slides show what we call attribution, where we're digging, so we're under the hood of looking at what is driving the returns. Is it how we're allocated in actuality versus what the policy says we should be allocated? We're not going to be spot on the targets every day of the period. Now we're also looking at the holdings of the managers, and did they have value relative to their benchmark or not? And there's more detail behind this, but just so that you know, we're looking at this on a regular basis, understanding what's driving the returns, what's driving the risk. Is it moving, in a way that we would expect, or do we need to take some corrective action along the way? Then over this last 1 year period, you see a big negative bar, 1.7% under manager value added. So that the active managers did not net of fees, and we always look net of fees, they did not outperform the benchmark. We did below the surface to understand why, look at what they hold, what their style is relative to factors that are rewarded or not rewarded in the market. And we are comfortable, that the managers are staying true to what they're expecting to do. So even though they're outperforming in this very difficult period, we expect long-term that not to be the case. The other bar is asset allocation. So I mentioned you're not always going to be right on your policy. Sometimes you'll be overweight or underweight depending on market movements or cash flows. The fact that we weren't exactly on policy detracted a little bit this last year too. So over the last 1 year period ending June, we underperformed the passive market benchmark by 1.8%. If we look at the 3 year period on the next page, we're actually outperforming by 10 basis points. And here, asset allocation differences and managers did add value for that long-term period. So it's been a rough 6 months for sure. I think the portfolio is still on track to deliver, the cash as it's needed to pay the benefits, and we just have to think as long-term investors. We have long-term oriented managers investing in the assets, and just ask for patience during this difficult period. There is some better news on the horizon. Usually, following these kinds of market declines, there are some opportunities. When when bond yields rise and bond prices fall, the good news is that the interest that you're getting is higher. You're finally earning some income on your bank account assets, et cetera, and we're reinvesting at those higher interest rates. So there will be more income generated from those portfolios. And the market is, adjusting. The next page shows July's performance. I'm sorry, this is page 70, so 2 slides ahead. Just to give you a snapshot of the July, the fund returned just under 5.5% just in the month, outperforming that policy index by 36 basis points. We have some change in market value updated, so it's about 1.317 billion at the end of June. Additional 3.5 million of distributions were paid out. There was $72 million of capital appreciation in July. So starting at a better position at the end of July. And then looking forward, the markets do continue to remain volatile. They may continue to remain volatile. This is sort of unprecedented in the amount of federal action that has taken place. But the Fed is really trying to orchestrate this soft landing, trying to negotiate the slow growth, tame inflation, and not put the economy into a recession. And as mentioned, we will be undertaking an asset liability study update given the new cash flows, which are higher than they were projected to be a few years ago. And again, it's trying to find that mix of assets within a portfolio that are going to best meet those cash flows at a reasonable amount of risk.
Any
Questions?
Yeah, Dr. Direct?
The fund expenses, how does it compare to, like, say, some pension fund managers? It's close to 1.5%, it looks like.
Oh,
Your fee and expenses.
I don't believe those are all investment management expenses. The expenses are actually probably lower than some hedge funds, given that half the portfolio is passively invested. We are, as an organization, Wiltshire has around $1 trillion of assets of similar portfolios. We can bring that negotiating power to bear, as well as in the past, you've sort of worked under the Florida State Board umbrella to negotiate more attractive fees. So your fees are actually below median for many of the managers that are used. We can get some more information on how that fees and expenses breaks down.
I was just curious on the actively managed funds, what is the fund fee?
Yeah, and we can at the next meeting show with analysis and benchmarking. But it does compare with that.
Any other questions? Right, just real, I think you said this, but when you're comparing performance to a benchmark, that's net of any fees.
Yes.
Okay.
Chair, can I ask one quick
Yes,
question?
sir, please.
What is our average yield on the bonds and the equities we have, like, on a consistent basis? I know they vary, but on average.
Yeah, our forward-looking expectations for the long credit portfolio over the next decade is around 4.9%. So higher than it has been for sure. It's doubled in the last 6 months. But you should note that the portfolios our assets are reinvested. So as income and maturities happen, they're just reinvested into the fund. We're not scraping cash off of those portfolios for benefits. We will be reevaluating that as the cash flow need to see if changes are necessary.
And the
equities. We're buying some of the cheap bonds with, I mean, is that essentially what?
Correct, right. So as income is thrown off of that portfolio, it's just reinvested back into it.
And I'm sorry, Dr. Ferretti, I didn't mean to.
So the equities, the same yield.
Dividend yield on equities is about 102%. So it's still pretty lower than bonds.
2%.
And again, that's all we invested as well.
Anything else? Well, thank you very much. And I guess we do not need to take a vote on this. And I guess, Melissa, did you want to add anything about the asset allocation study?
I'll do that when it'll become obvious when I pop up the slide there.
Okay. All right. So then, let's thank you all. Thank you, Katie. let's go on to the actuarial update. This will require a decision. So, who are we, Melissa, you and Mark Crossville? Mark is on the screen, okay? So, Melissa, I'll let you kick it off and hand it over to Mark.
I think I'm just gonna go ahead and give it to Mark.
Okay, Mark?
And then I will add a little bit.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm sorry I'm not actually alive there in person today, but I had something else that was already fixed up. Anyway, so the last time we spoke was as of September the 30th, when we did the actuals then, and since that time, the actual report's been updated a couple of times. So I'm going to talk today about December 31 report and also the June 2022 report. So if we could go to the next picture of the slide, I write a letter to Melissa, and it's intended for the board as well, for just kind of summarizing where the actuarials are. And my role in this is reviewing the work of another actuary who actually does the work. So there's a company called Turner Consulting who actually does your actuarial work and figures the reserves, and then I do a peer review. And so what that practically means is we'll see drafts of the report discussed with the other actuary. There may be a bit of back and forth. And then I ultimately render an opinion as to the reasonableness of the report, and then also try to highlight the major issues for you. So, my main conclusion, which is in section 2 on the bottom of the page on the screen, is that the reserves, both at December 31, 2021 and June 30, 2022, are reasonably determined based on the stated assumptions. And the key assumption is that the interest rate, looking forward, the inflation rate will be less than the interest rate by 1.5 points. So what the actuarial report is doing is figuring the future value of all the benefits that have been promised for all the births that have happened through the point in time. And it first of all calculates those benefits at a present value, taking into account the time value of money, which is based on a hypothetical investment rate, and it also puts in a future inflation rate, and they kind of offset each other, but the key assumption is a 1.5 differential. So in the context of the some of the comments from the parents about the benefits rising over time, or the rates of pay rising over time, cooked into the reserves is the idea that over the long term, the amount that NICA pays out for a particular service will increase over time for inflation. And it's obviously has not. We've coming through a period where there was low inflation, and the benefit increases were even lower than the low inflation rate. But there is something put into the reserves with the anticipation in the future, that over the long term, what NICA pays will be subject to the inflation, just like the rest of the world is. If we could go to the next page, please. So the top section, I just wanted to stress that when we're talking about the loss reserves, what we're talking about is a liability on the balance sheet. Sometimes, when people are talking about reserves, it's easy to get them confused with the assets. So what we're trying to do in the reserves is estimate what the cost will be for all the things that have already been promised based on the current law, and as a liability. And then there's what we want to have is assets sufficient to provide for those liabilities. So that brings me into the next section of section 4 about the financial solidity of NICA. And as I say, is what we really want to have happen is that the assets being more than the liabilities. And in fact, is what happened in June because of the large, losses on unrealized losses in the investment portfolio. It actually, the assets were slightly less than the liabilities, which is obviously not a favorable situation. And in July, I understand that reversed again, so that the assets were by the end of July were likely higher than the liabilities. But on that test of kind of solvency of NICA, it's kind of sailing close to the wind. Then there's another second kind of solvency standard applies to NICA, and that's called the threshold calculation. And we talked about this last time when we're talking about the September, but it's basically a formula that's set in the statute that's a minimum that NICA has to meet to continue accepting claims. And we basically, I haven't actually redone the calculation, but I've estimated what it would be on a very conservative basis. And I believe we would comfortably pass that at June. So that's not such a worry now. But again, the margins are not, before when we were talking, we had hundreds of thousands of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars margin. Now we got much less. If we could move to the next section. These are just sort of notable items. There's a recounting. There's obviously the Senate Bill 1786 and Medicaid, how they're reflected in the reserves, and basically all these things were fully reflected starting in September 30th. So there's not much different in what we're doing now, what we were doing in September. There's obviously been large payments of cash out in the last year or so as all these changes have been occurring. And what we expect to happen is in the next quarter or two for that to stabilize and we go down to a kind of a normal running costs when all the retroactive payments are made. But I wanted to also point out this time in the reserving methodology, there's quite a number of enhancements that were made to the methodology starting in December as compared to what had been done in the past. And these enhancements occurred both at the NICA level and at the Turner analysis level. So at the NICA level, NICA goes through kind of claim by claim and develops what we call reserve worksheets and looks at the individual circumstances of each child and estimates basically the lifetime costs, looking at in detail by different expense categories what they think the needs will be and how much they will cost. And ultimately it provides an estimate of the lifetime cost in today's dollars. And then one of the things that was different this time, I think NICA took a very hard look at each claim and did then the revisions that they would normally do. But in addition, they built in the Medicaid changes directly into the reserve worksheets, whereas previously we'd kind of estimated them on a gross basis, not claim by claim. And so that was done starting in December. And then in addition to the Medicaid change, NICA went through claim by claim and looked at the possibilities of saving money by buying health insurance policies under the Affordable Care Act, rather than just pay for the services directly. So in the previous study, it had been assumed that what Medicaid was paying was kind of an indication of what we would be paying when Medicaid was out of the picture. But this time there's a more detailed analysis and looking through and seeing, well, where could the health insurance save money on that NICA has to pay. And then Turner, in his technical analysis, made other changes. He incorporated the same things that NICA had done on its worksheets. But he also, in his analysis, went much more kind of claim by claim and looked at life expectancies of different populations of claimants. So there's much more directly ties to the overall aggregate reserve to the individual claimants than previously. I have some observations, and maybe if we can skip through a couple of pages, because I can just talk through the actual numbers. If you could go another page. So this is the chart where I've summarized the kind of key numbers each quarter starting in beginning of 2017. And if we could go on a couple more pages. Yeah, so this is page 3 of attachment 1. And so it's showing the key numbers. And this starts on September 30th, 2021, which is the last time we talked, and it's got each quarter on in between. And there's a few things I'd like to point out here. So first of all, I'd maybe a focus on the total reserve on line 5. So this is the liability to pay for all the future costs of all the claimants on a present value basis. And you can see that it basically decreased a bit in December, and then it's kind of crept along or crept up again. And basically the reason for the decrease was the consideration of the cost savings from the Affordable Care Act that NICA did when it went through its reserve worksheets. And then I think the other thing to notice is if you look at the total outstanding claims, which is on row 9. So what I mean here by the outstanding claims, these are the claims that are open, and it just includes the claims where the claimant is alive, and it's alive when it's accepted into NICA, and this is where virtually all the liabilities lie. And you can see the actual number of claims hasn't really changed very much since we last talked. And if you go back and to the previous pages, you'll see that number had been increasing. And then the other thing I think is interesting here is if you look at the average liability or average reserve per claim, which is on line 11, you can see it's kind of stabilizing out at about 4.7 million per claim. And if you looked back to the pre SB 1786, you'd see it was about 3.8 million. And the reason why it's increased is taking on the costs that Medicaid used to pay. That was all I was going to say affirmatively, but if there's any questions, I'll be pleased to try and answer them.
Any questions? Thank you, sir. Any questions? Melissa, do you have anything to add? All right, so we're cutting it close, I think, is the bottom line here. Long-term solvency at least, but I guess short-term and pretty solid shape, and just keep the fingers crossed that the market's coming back. Make all the difference.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, it's Dr. Lynn. I have a conflict that started about an hour ago, so I have to depart the meeting at this point. I apologize for my early departure. Melissa was aware of that.
Yes, sir. She and Melissa made me aware of that. Thank you for being with us as long as you have been.
All right.
We'll see you next time. And thanks for everything you've done behind the scenes. Yeah,
Absolutely. Of course.
All right, Melissa, you're recognized for item number 9 on the agenda, the financial statements, and oh, wait, I'm sorry. We need to take a motion on the actuarial update. Melissa, can you explain exactly which of these reports we're approving?
The December 31st. The June 30th is a draft, so voting to accept the December 31st.
You have a motion. Yeah.
Motion to accept.
All right, Dr. Caesar.
A second.
And we have a second. Any objection? No objection. Next item does not require a vote, and Melissa, you're recognized to walk us through the financial statement.
Well, I think what I'd like to do is just turn it over to our CPA. As I said, I'm going to pull everything together after all this, and so me talking right now, I think might not add any value. So if you just talk about where we are and why we are where we are, and just remind the board of our responsibilities to the state.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
For those of you who haven't met me, I'm Russell Perkins. I'm an engagement shareholder with CPA firm of Thomas L. Ferguson. We are your independent CPA. I'm not an employee of NICA. In fact, I like to remind the board that I'm engaged with the board of directors and not management. We've got great board management. I'd like to thank Melissa and Tim. They promoted an efficient and effective financial statement audit. But again, I answer to the board. So any questions you have that are financial in nature, feel free to reach out to me throughout the course of the year. Not just during the field work with financial statement audit. And I'll be happy to address any concerns that you have or even just questions. These financial statements that you have here are prepared in accordance with governmental accounting standards. And many of you are in the private sector. You hear terms such as income statements, balance sheets. They're in a little bit different format. I would just slightly, it's just subtle differences, but I can walk you through those. I think that was necessary. The financial statements are required in the Florida statute. Financial statement audit is required to be performed by an independent CPA. We are currently conducting the audit, which should be done within the next month, certainly before the next board meeting. I have to submit these on your behalf to the state of Florida. We're a component unit of the state of Florida. Many of these financial statements will roll up into the actual financial statement of the state of Florida. If you look in your packet, what I'd like to do is briefly go over the preliminary result of our financial statement audit. And you'll see in here the table of contents for the financial statement audit. If you can turn to page 12, that's the statement of net position. In the private sector, it's also known as a balance sheet. So it's all of your assets, all your liabilities. The difference between the two is your sort of surplus, your net position, your financial worth. And as your actuary indicated earlier, as of June 30th, 2022, which is the end of your fiscal year, your assets are approximately $1.3 billion. Your liabilities are approximately $1.37 billion. So you're in a deficit position right now, approximately $30 million. That doesn't mean that you don't have cash in hand. That means the assets that you have, the cash, the investments, the buildings, etc., their value is slightly less than the projected value of all of your liabilities at June 30th. We're talking very big numbers. This can fluctuate quickly. The market has recovered ever so slightly. But what I'd like to highlight, your net position of loss of $30 million, your deposit position of approximately $500 million last year. So how did you get there? If you turn to page 13, your statement of revenues, expenses, and change in net position, also known as an income statement. Your revenues were less than your expenses. You lost over $500 million last year. Some may say that's unsustainable long term. I would agree with that. And again, the biggest reason for that, if you look about 2/3 of the way down, it was the investment income. You had a loss of approximately $300 million for investments last year. That's unrealized. And what unrealized means, you didn't sell the assets just lost value. They have the potential for coming back. They have the potential for dropping even further. That's why you have to follow and stick with your investment policy, which is in place. And it's a long-term investment policy. It's not just this year. What I tell all of my clients, and we're having difficult conversations this year, is we're here for the long haul. It's not this year, it's not the last 12 months, but you need to position yourself to be here 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And the appropriate investment policies, hire the appropriate advisors, and stick to that policy. The financial statements, there have been no accounting pronouncements. I'm just going to get into the technical aspects of it. They're going to dramatically affect this organization this year. I'll certainly let the board know if there are any on the horizon that will impact this organization, but they're none this year. I don't see any on the horizon that will have a significant impact on the organization. The financial statement notes that you'll see in here are very similar to the prior year. Maybe they haven't really changed on a historical basis, and I don't see those changing going forward. Are there any questions of the board members of the results of operations for the year ended June 30th, 2022, or where you're at as far as a balance sheet? You know, and this is important, you know, in making decisions for future benefits, you know, kind of knowing where you're at. It's like looking at your bank account, so to speak.
I do have a question.
Yes.
So when we look at the fact that our claims reserve and the liabilities were less, is that where we look at pausing the program from accepting or not? So it just continues. Okay.
Yeah. Let's flip.
So remember, there's two calculations. One is the one in statute that's a guardrail for if things get really, really bad, you stop taking participants. We are not in danger of hitting that guardrail. This calculation is if the program were to end today, do we have enough cash to pay all projected future liabilities for all of the current participants? As Russell said, it doesn't mean we can't pay our bills this year, next year. It might mean in 30 years, we might be a little short of cash, but as you can tell, you know, the fluctuation in the value of our investments is huge. Now, what else is huge, and we'll walk through this, what else is huge is the $200 million hit from incorporating the Medicaid impact. So we had double whammy, as I like to call it, but one of those whammies should recover. So my message is, don't panic, but we need to pay attention.
Yes, line item claims incurred of $262 million. Right. And then the claims incurred for the participants for this calendar year, or?
That is.
I can work through that. Remember, I did that presentation at the board meeting a couple of meetings ago. The claims expense is the change in all the liabilities from one year to the next. And so when we calculate the reserve, the difference between the two is expense. It isn't what we spent. And so, like I just said, that huge $207 million, that's because we included Medicaid going forward in our reserves, and they weren't included in the past.
Yeah. To answer your question further, I think if you look on page 14, which is statement of cash flows, the actual cash that went out the door was approximately $77 million. Yes.
This is more from Melissa. I'm the only OBGYN in the room, so no one will hear me ask this question, but this is reported. When's the last time we increased the fees on the OBGYNs? It's been a while. No, never. And I mean, so, you know, and I'm getting ready to assume a leadership role in ACOG at the state level. You know, this program is really important to maintain the health of the practicing obstetricians in the community, so we don't have deserts. There's certain parts of the country where there aren't practicing obstetricians because of liability, and so we really need to critically look internally at ourselves as a society, and you know, as we hold steady on our families for the cost of living. I mean, the obstetricians, I mean, this saves most of it anyway. You know where I'm going with this. So you know where I'm going with this. So you know, this.
That would require a legislative act change.
And so I think, and I'll put my legislative hat, the concern from the American ACOG, the Florida ACOG, is that if we go to legislation, they're gonna disrupt the program. And so.
Well, the greater, you know, and I think, you know, there has been historically and I'm sorry, So get my speed, yeah.
It's okay.
Historically,
I'll tell you.
there's been tension in the legislature.
Yes.
And I think NICA has historically been afraid of legislation because of fears that there would be a lot of negative changes to the program. However, we survived what I think was a very challenging legislative session, the session before last. And I think that we could go back to the legislature and have other issues addressed without fear that the program is going to be cratered. Now, one thing I would say on the fee issue, though, is that there are factions of the FMA that are very adamant that they shouldn't be paying for the OBGYN's
I know.
coverage. And it is the way the NICA statute works is that the OBGYNs are assessed, but also every physician in Florida is assessed. And so if we were to go back, we run the risk of having the FMA decide that they want to take on that issue and dump all of the liability for assessments on the OBGYNs, which would have a dramatic effect in changing the reimbursement amounts.
How about the hospital product? And the hospitals are contributing.
And the hospitals are contributing as well, and the hospitals have not been
$50, isn't it? $50
for delivery, but there's also an exemption if you do significant numbers of Medicaid births. And so the hospitals that do high volume Medicaid get an offset. So, I mean, the whole fee structure would be at issue going forward, which, creates tensions. And,
Sorry, I didn't mean to open your words.
no, I mean, I think it's important for everybody to understand. It's not just the issue. I don't think that the discussion would end if we just increase the fees on OBGYN. Not to say that that couldn't be the solution, but there are these, the hospital, and thank you for mentioning, yes, the hospitals are also assessed. They haven't been as vocal as some of the FMA members. There's some very vocal FMA members that feel it's unfair for them to be paying any part of the funding for the NICA program.
Hospitals, I think, would be happily willing to pay more, at least twice or even higher, because that's a very minuscule amount they are paying. And honestly, I mean, some of the risks that these babies are, some of the causes is maybe I would say 70% hospital, 30% physician responsibility. So they should.
Right, the hospitals realize a significant benefit from the NICA program as well. There's no question.
Yeah.
Good.
Are we making sure that everyone's paying also on people involved?
Yeah,
we do.
Paying?
I'm
Yeah.
gonna,
Okay.
just so no, we don't all speak at once, I'm gonna recognize speakers and I will recognize.
I recognize time is of the essence. At this time, nothing more to report. Again, board members feel free to reach out to me at any point in time. We anticipate having this slide completed within the next month, probably prior to next board meeting, and get this submitted to the state of Florida. There.
No, and thank you very much. I noticed you, both of you wanted to speak.
Oh, no, I just had a question about how are we making sure that everyone that is involved in the program affected by NICA, all the doctors, are they paying their?
We have a collection efforts for, if a doctor doesn't pay, we actually.
Does
go
NICA
after
do
them.
that? though?
What?
They
Yes.
do that?
You
Yes.
can't, if your hospital is a participating hospital, your privileges will be sanctioned at the hospital level.
Okay.
So like at the hospital level, it's in the bylaws that if you deliver babies at X hospital, you have to be a NICA participant. And I can tell you from a medical staff external to NICA, physicians have lost their privileges when they don't have NICA, because the hospital feels like this is a way to reduce its liability. So that's external
That's
to
good
external to that.
And just so you know, right, if it creates a real difficult situation for the OBGYN, let's just say, or the hospital if the OBGYN is not participating, because then they're not protected by the program.
Yeah, even if they are covered by NICA and then they're not paying in, that's the.
Right.
How do you make sure that they do? But or there's money there.
And actually,
I just was hearing pushback about FMA, and my question is, how often are we reaching out to them, especially if the hospitals are pretty much pro NICA? Are we on a consistent basis, or is this 10 years ago FMA was giving pushback?
Yeah, no, I would say that there has been a consistent voice within the FMA. I mean, the OBGYNs are also obviously very active within the FMA. and have been strong advocates for the NICA program, but there are some, groups within the FMA that have also been vocal. There's, I think, always a discussion at the FMA annual meeting about this. And I think the majority of the FMA has been supportive of maintaining, participation in funding for NICA. But I mean, if you have to go back and ask them to increase the funding, that's going to be a different discussion. So even though the FMA has overall supported NICA, I think if we were to go back and say, hey, it's time to increase assessments on all physicians, that there would be pushback. At least, and I don't know, yes, there has been continued discussion and dialogue with the FMA. I just don't know where that pushback would be if they look for, if we look to increase the assessment.
I
Do
can
we
just tell
regularly
you
attend
from,
those meetings?
just from personal experience, that's the kind of discussion that if you bring it up at all, you have to be really careful in even initiating that kind of discussion, because it can generate a fallout that you may not be anticipating. I mean, it's a extremely because you're talking about taxes.
Right.
And members of the legislature they're not lining up to sponsor tax increases. And I really appreciate your comments. I think that's something we should keep in the back of our, in our back pocket, because it may be a conversation we have to have.
I'm just
Certainly
interested. I
rather-
think that there might be more support than we think. I mean, Brennan sees 10 specialists and every single one of them talk with us about them paying their NICA fee and how ridiculous of a nothing it is. It's literally like them going to McDonald's for a regular human being.
But as the chair said, the legislature basically abhors any tax
Right.
increase. And they would view this as a tax increase.
So they're never gonna increase it?
What?
That doesn't mean that.
It's just a hard conversation to have.
Yeah, it's very difficult. but it's-
So just to give a perspective to the parents, 80% of the physicians are, other than OBGYNs and let's say pediatricians, the rest of them do not have anything to do with the care of the mom or the baby. So like a dermatologist or a pathologist, we are also paying the fee, which, it's a relationship to provide health services in the state. So that's where I think most of the pushback from FMA is coming, is they don't know this side of things at all. They're just paying a tax for nothing they were involved with. So I think the OBGYNs and the hospitals, which are direct liability, may not have any problems. But non-involved physicians are the ones that may say no. So we may take that approach. The people that are benefiting are the hospitals, the OBGYNs. So they may be more willing to pay.
Can you raise fees for only a certain sector, or do you have to just?
No, whatever they put in a bill, they can.
Yeah, you can restructure the whole fee, you can do anything you want in the legislature. But
Again, it's just, we would want to think this through very, very carefully before even initiating that. And I can just tell you that from decades of experience working in this process. There's certain, if NICA were to get involved in that discussion, I would want to have that very well. I would want to have a strategy very well vetted out in advance and have some way of understanding what the reactions are. Yes.
If you decide to go in that direction, I'm happy to help take lead with you and in those strategic planning meetings, and even engage the state ACOG. I think because that would be the appropriate organization to support. So I would be happy to volunteer myself.
Now, what I need to do, Melissa, can you cover the next section in 11 minutes?
I can cover it in less than that, because I think we got.
Okay, well, let's do with that. Is there anything else on this topic? All right, so this, again, this was not for a vote, but I think this is some pretty important information, because depending on the markets, we're not nearly as solvent as we were this time last year.
Yeah, so it makes me think, for me, I look at it like, well, as far as we are, what I'm looking at, seeing how low it was is shocking. And it also is the reason why it's harder to make the decision to increase a benefit, when we're talking about these things, because then you look at the number and you're like, well, it's gonna just keep packing on, right? Like that, if we increase it, we increase it, we increase all of those benefits, it makes it harder when you see the number down. So for me, it made me think about it, because like you said, 30 years from now, well, my child may still be alive 30 years from now, and I don't want to think that there will start losing benefits as time goes on.
So this is the reality check portion of our meeting.
No,
But,
thank
but
you.
honestly, the earlier portion of our meeting was a reality check portion as well. So this, if this were easy, anybody could do it, guys. But, I'm happy to be serving you all. All right, so Melissa, you are recognized for 10 minutes.
So as Renee said, and as Mark pointed out, there is inflation built into this reserve number. So just so everyone's aware, it's not a flat number. What I was going to try, what I'm trying to do with this next slide is pull together all the information that you've heard. For example, if the investment folks said, here's our balance, I want to make sure you understand why that doesn't exactly tie to the balance on our financial statements. So the last time we talked about a lot of these numbers were at September 30th. You all made a lot of decisions based on those numbers. Our unreserved assets that we've talked about in the past have decreased from our last discussion, 264 million, which is the difference between our assets and our liabilities. And so why is that? So as you can see, our investment balance decreased 326 million. Some of that has about 70 million of that recovered as of July 31st. And while half of my brain panics, the other half of my brain is going to be fine. And then if you look at our liabilities, you will see a number on the actuary report, and you might say, well, how come that's not the exact same number on your financials? There are a couple of adjustments that are made, and I've laid out those adjustments. We add an additional 6 months of IBNR, some risk margin. We went ahead and added the estimated retro for the family care that you all approved at the last meeting. So then you can tie it to the number on the balance sheet, and then tie it to the total liability number on the balance sheet. But you see that number decreased $65 million from our last conversation. And as Mark said, that's due to the refinement of the Medicaid projection. But what I always like to do is test myself, because if I was a board member, I'd be looking back at what my executive director told me at the last meeting. I told you all that I thought our unreserved assets would be about 160 million after all of the decisions you made. They were actually -31, so that's terrible. That's a difference of 190 million, but as you can see, I would have been doing better if our investments hadn't dropped $326 million. So I account for the difference. It's all the change in assets. And again, we are in it for the long haul. And I am confident that we're going to recover, but these numbers can be a little bit sobering. The next thing I want to take you to is cash flows, and you stole my thunder a little bit, because I feel like we've got an approved operating budget for our administrative budget, but that's such a small portion of what we pay out. I wanted to give you all a feel for the cash in and the cash out. As you can see, the cash received from hospitals and physicians has been increasing. We have been improving the way that we collect these fees. And we all recently there was a change in statute that kind of very subtle change, but as a result, the Department of Health is now requiring that non-participating physicians attest that they have paid their assessment before they will renew their license. That's a big deal. I have no idea what impact that's going to have. I haven't projected that impact. We did better last year because we emailed people their statements instead of snail mailing them their statements. And I expect we'll see an even bigger number in those collections. I just have no idea what it's going to be. Then that whole next session is the cash out for benefits. As you can see, in 2020, it was about $20 million a year, then up to 49, then up to 77. Again, a lot of retroactive stuff, the retroactive parent award. On an ongoing basis, I think it's gonna be about $40 million. On top of that, the cash paid for administration, this middle section is technology upgrades to our system. But that bottom line, that net cash used in investing activities, that June 30th, 2020 negative number means we used cash to buy more investments. Meaning we had extra cash because we were collecting more than we were paying out. We are now in a situation where we will routinely be spending more cash than we bring in from the assessments. But as I mentioned in our last meeting, we should be able to make up the difference in investment income. But that underscores the reason that we need a new asset allocation study. Our current asset allocation study assumed we always had excess cash. That is no longer the case, and so our investment strategy may need to be adjusted. And so we will, I think, I would like to say we would have that ready at the next board meeting, but it might take a little longer than that, but we will have that ready in about 6 months. So again, I thought that this, here's how we use all our cash, and this is why our situation is different. And again, so if we're spending, $40 million in claims, $4 million in administration, we're not gonna run out of cash anytime soon. So again, negative fund balance, not a reason to panic, but we have to think strategically about how we address that going forward. At the last board meeting, I told you I thought our cash flow deficit would be about 10.3. This is 8.8. I'd like to say it's because I'm so awesome at projecting. It is not quite that. I was low on expense and low on revenue, but the net is about the same. So we are pretty consistent with what I presented last time as far as where I thought we'd be with cash flow. With that context, budget to actual, we went over our approved budget, primarily legal fees. Some related to the phishing attempt, others related to the ongoing litigation, which we're going to have an executive session about. I have next year's budget that I would ask for approval. I'd also ask if the board would consider this to be approved as a ongoing budget unless I came back and requested changes. And I'm better at budgeting than is reflected here, but there were a lot of unknowns when I walked in, and we did not have an approved budget when I walked in. So we worked hard to get that done. And I would say, at some point in the future, we might want the board to, no, we don't. Never mind. I think it's important for you all to know the volume of cash that goes out for claims reimbursement that is not part of the administrative budget. I don't think you should approve claims reimbursement as a budget because it is what it is. It comports to our existing policies. But again, it's important for you to be aware. So.
All right. So we do need to take a motion to approve the budget for the general and administrative expenses.
Make a motion to approve the budget.
All right. Caesar and then Dr. Letty. Are there questions or comments or? Well, I'm assuming that is any objection. All right, so show that adopted without objection. So Melissa, you did pretty good. You did it in 8 minutes, and we got through that. So, for those of you that stuck with us the whole time, thank you for being here. I know we've seen you on Zoom call. Actually meet you all in person. Just real quick, where did you come from?
Wildwood?
Oh yeah,
Right by the village.
Right. Wildwood's not too far, 50 miles.
2 hours south.
Neighbors. Thank you all for driving.
So because I did have the one additional.
Yes.
Yeah, I have one additional one. It wasn't directly related to parental pay, so I didn't read it during that time. And I know we're in a rush, so it's kind of.
And Ms. Cruz has she's one of the parents who's tried to speak at other meetings and had some technical issues, and so asked that.
I remember. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I gotta get- Okay. I had a couple of them opened up and now I let it go. Okay. Oh, no, Melissa, there it is. You know, it's in a email from you and I know. Will we come back after the executive session at all? Or maybe then I can-
Planning on it.
I'm sorry. I can find it. Melissa will find it. I feel like it must be in a thread of something and I can't get to the exact one. Sorry, guys. It didn't come from her, it came from Melissa, so that's why I have to go through. Okay. Was it an attachment? It was. I found it. Okay, it was an attachment. Okay, I'm gonna try to go as quick as I can. All right. This is what the mother wrote. I want to start by introducing myself. My name is Fatima Cruz, a mother of 7. My story starts when I was 20 years old, a mother of 3 beautiful, healthy babies, when my angel came into my life. His name is Joshua Isaiah Quinn. He was born on 7/1/2005 at 38 weeks. The doctor told me he was a very healthy baby. The night Joshie came into my life, I was bathing the kids when I started having contractions. I took a shower and went to lay down. My contractions woke me up. That is when I told my husband to call my mother. When we got to the hospital, I did the registration, then they wheeled me into the room. The nurse gave me a cup to do my urine test. I went to the bathroom and I noticed that I was spot bleeding. When I got done, I immediately told the nurse. She told me that that was normal. I told her I'd never had that with 3 kids and that it never happened to me before. The nurse blew me off. When I laid down, I started pouring out blood and she wasn't getting Joshie's heartbeat. After a few minutes later, she was having a hard time getting it. She said it was fading. She had me walk to the ultrasound room while I was bleeding. I laid down in the ultrasound table when the lady was checking me. They were seeing my placenta and said it was 50-50 uterus. They were seeing me bleeding out. I had heard very faintly that the nurse called the doctor and told her to wait for him. I don't know how long it was because I was in and out, and I heard the doctor say to the nurses, "What the hell are you waiting for?" The doctor is the one who handles the baby after C-section. The doctor, sorry. At first, they told my mother she could come in, but when it got to be an emergency C-section room, they told her she cannot. When they took me in, the anesthesia surgeon was telling me that he was going to do. Then he started to count when the doctor walked in and putting on his gown and I was out. While I was doing the C-section, they came to my mother and told her, did she want to save me? She told them, do whatever it takes to save me. She said that it took 4 hours to do the C-section. When the doctor woke me up, I never forget what he said. I'm sorry. He said, you had a hard time, your baby had a hard time. I need you to sign this paper. I said, I'll try, and so I did. There was another guy with him. My mother was in the waiting room waiting the whole time. No one came to get her to help me sign it or check what it was signed. Oh, I lost so much blood I didn't want to I couldn't wake up fully for 3 days later. I would open my eyes and see and then black out. And then I would see my mom. When I woke up and realized what had happened to Josh, I was so hurt. I went to see him and all I could do was touch his hand, and he had a ventilator in his mouth for a month and a half. I was so happy when I was able to hold him, and I could not keep from staring at him. He has a way of making me melt. When I went to talk to my doctor, he told me there was something happened and that it was my body's fault, that everything happened to Joshie. Can you imagine how that made me feel? I was so scared to have any more kids because he told me that. Every day that I was in the hospital, sometimes my mom would come with me and sometimes she would drop me off. After 3 months, he got a G-tube and they told me that he would also need a trach. They said that they didn't see Joshie living past a year old. He's 17 now. Joshua was diagnosed with microcephaly, cerebral palsy, massive brain damage, seizure disorder, Stridor, G-tube. Joshie would have been normal if they had not waited and had taken him out on time. They kept in my belly for over an hour after seeing my placenta had erupted. When we got home with Joshy, his stridor was so bad that he wasn't gaining weight and he would aspirate all the time. It was so hard because I was so young, but God took care of me and Joshy. At 5 months old, Joshy's stridor was so bad that his carbon dioxide tripled in 3 hours. That was the day I truly thought I was going to lose Joshy. The doctor asked me if I wanted to sign DNR because they didn't know why this was happening. I remember being so upset with God. At first, I told the doctor to do anything she could to save him. I was so worried I was going to lose him. Something that never leaves my mind. The doctor knew I was hurting, so she told me to go in the room and sit by myself for a little bit. I told myself if God was going to take him, he would do it with or without DNR. I signed a DNR that day. When Joshua was a year old, his heart went to 200 beats a minute and his oxygen was at 82. He was also aspirating. I took him to St. Mary's Hospital. These people told me that he had a common cold and sent me home. I called his PPEC coordinator, Alex, and she told me to send him to school in the morning and she would look at him. By 10 a.m., she told me that she had requested me to go to another hospital. I felt like they were just waiting for Joshua to pass away. When I took him to Palms West Medical Center, they found out Joshua wasn't digesting 3 cc's in 3 hours. This is why he was aspirating. And they also found out that the stridor was so bad that he was using all of his nutrition to breathe. Joshua was 9 pounds at a year old. That is when they decided to do a trach on him. Everything changed. He started gaining weight and breathing normally. They taught me how to change it and they set me up with nursing. When I got nursing, I told them what had happened and they told me that I needed to find a lawyer. I think Joshua was about 2 years old when I did this. My first lawyer told me I did not have a case. I lost 6 months from this. When I found another lawyer, he was a medical doctor and a lawyer. He told me that I could sue the hospital. About 6 or 8 months into the case, he asked me if I had signed a NICA form. I told him I didn't remember, but that is when he told me that I had signed it. He said to me that NICA is the best option for me. He said that it would be my word against theirs. Shortly after we received NICA, we got a settlement of $100,000. I could say a lot about this concept of NICA. I feel like the government gave some doctors and hospitals the ability to do so much harm, even get away with murder. They pay very little for what they have done and got away with. I could say many things on how things were run in NICA, but I choose not to. Everything is changing and that's the only thing that I can ask for. I just thank you all for listening to me and my angel story.
Thank you. That was not easy.
Sorry.
Okay. All right. I think we are going to we'll go into the executive session. For those of you who are visiting, thank you for being here. We're going to have to basically clear the room except for board members and our legal staff. And staff, we appreciate you, I guess.
Yeah, Marty and Carol are gonna join by there.
Okay, do we need Matt to stay in?
Over there.
Okay, and then, thanks, Matt.
Okay, so Matt's gonna set us up. For all of you that come through the executive session, we're scheduled till 5. We're a little bit past that. That's okay. Is there anything else from the board? I'm going to limit any additional comments to board members. Anyone that didn't get a chance to speak that would like to speak to the board, I would encourage you to show up at the next board meeting, and we're always happy to hear from the public and especially family members. Any other comments for the good of the order? All right. I think with that, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Actually, sorry. Do we know when the next meeting is? Do we usually say it now or we don't know yet?
We usually throw out some dates.
Yeah, I didn't know. So I know
Um,
usually it says it on the thing and I didn't see it. That's what I was great.
Yeah, well, why don't we, because I couldn't even begin to tell you.
That, and I think that's what happens, is we kind of say that might work, and then we have to follow up the email, but I would ask you, I mean, we've been irregular, it's not like every 3 months, sometimes it's every 2, sometimes it's every 4, but in general, do you want me to check with people on dates in October? Because then we get into the holiday season, and I think it's a little more difficult.
Okay, yeah, I agree, we need to have another meeting before the new year, is that okay with you? Okay, and this will be a virtual meeting, so we'll all be, I assume you're suggesting virtual.
Yes.
Good.
Although the airport is lovely.
It is lovely.
Are you at the main hospital?
Yeah.
Oh, we've got parking passes.
Oh, good.
It's okay, some sun pass.
Good, well, I want to get one of those. All right, well, we have a motion to
Motion to
adjourn.
adjourn,
And,
yes.
All right, we have a second, so we are adjourned. Thanks to everyone for joining us.